All right, I would like to call this meeting of the Lisbon Town Council to order. Could we all rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Twyla, the roll call.
Councilor Bickford?
Here.
Councilor Bowie?
Here.
Councilor Cody?
Here.
Councilor LaRochelle?
Here.
Councilor Lunt?
Here.
Councilor Mason?
Here.
Councilor Pomelo?
Here.
All right, first item, Twyla.
Under public hearings, a renewal special entertainment permit for Graziano's Restaurant.
All right, we will open that public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on the issue of Graziano's? All right, seeing none, I will close that public hearing. The next item.
Is a public hearing for the sign ordinance amendment.
Okay, we will open that public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who wants to speak on the sign ordinance amendment? That's the change from 1 minute to, I believe we had it 10 seconds. Okay, seeing no members of the public on that issue, I will close that public hearing. Next item.
Is under public hearings, Lisbon Comprehensive Plan Update Amendment.
Okay, I will open the floor on that public hearing to anyone who wants to speak on that issue. Mr. Fillmore, if you'd take the podium.
Larry Fillmore from Lisbon. Does anybody up there understand or know what is planned for the projects that we are talking about, amending these comprehensive plans for? I.e., you're changing residential areas to commercial. Do we have any idea what is going in those areas, or has it been presented to anybody? What's going in those areas? Because I think that makes a big difference. If you're going to put a gas station in the middle of the Dragon Pit, I think we got an issue with that. So does anybody up there have any idea as to what is being done or going to be done with these changes to the comprehensive plan?
I don't know, Steve, Mike, you want to address that?
Mike Cody, Code Enforcement Officer. First of all, even though the Dragon Pit may be changed to a commercial zone, it will be regulated under a site plan review. First of all, they have to come up with a plan to show us what is exactly going into that area. And also, our wellhead protection ordinance that will come into play will outweigh the commercial zone requirements. Therefore, that will be regulating what goes in there, what doesn't go in there. And obviously, the aquifer protection is exactly that. And the wellhead will be very, very restrictive about what goes in there. And definitely not gas stations, oil businesses, or anything that may impact our water system.
I just asked, does anybody know what's going in there at this point?
We won't know that until the owners approach us with site plans and tell us exactly what is going in there. We have no idea at this point.
So at this point, nobody knows what's going on in there.
Well, they haven't proposed a specific plan yet, so we don't know exactly what it would be. I mean, they could change their plans.
Thank you.
Yep. Any further comments on the Lisbon Comprehensive Plan Update Amendment? All right, seeing none, I will close this public hearing. Next item, Twyla.
Is under consent agenda. Are there any items to be removed for discussion at this time? Seeing none.
Okay.
Order 2011-48, to approve the minutes of April 5, 2011, mobile home park renewals as presented, which include Avery Street Park, Colonial Gardens Trail Park, Ridge Mobile Home Park, Sabatis Creek, Town and Country Mobile Home Village, Warumbo Estates, and Warumbo Park, and a special entertainment permit and liquor license for Casamia doing business as Graziano's Restaurant.
Do I hear a motion on that?
So moved. I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor? And opposed? All right, motion passes.
Order passed, 7-0.
Next item.
Is under council orders, resolutions, and ordinances. Order 2011-49, a proclamation recognizing Childhood Cancer Awareness Week.
Motion to accept.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion?
I just think it's a good idea.
All right, yeah. So that makes sense to me. I don't see any negatives to it. Any comments from the public on that? Okay. All those in favor? And opposed?
Order passed, 7-0.
Next item?
Order 2011-50, Town Report Bids.
You have in your packets four proposals that came in. The recommendation is to go with Walsh Printing. It was the only company that met bid specs and came in under the $1,500 that we have budgeted for that.
I make a motion to approve the bid to Walsh Printing.
Second that.
Okay, any further discussion from council?
Can we look at the comparison?
Yep. Okay, Twyla has copies of each. These aren't actually ours, these are sample ones.
Samples.
So which is which? Which,
This is Walsh. This is one of the other ones.
Right. And
okay. It's good.
anyone down there want to see the books?
Already saw 'em.
Okay, you already saw them. Yeah, I saw them earlier.
The biggest difference is the binding and the quality of the printing.
Yeah, and it's,
So folks can see it.
Right.
And the binding that we're talking about going with is the binding like this versus the one that looks like it's got a taped edge. And as you can see, it's already starting to peel. So for the purposes of archiving the records, it would be better to go with a nice sturdy binding on the outside.
I think that makes sense. We don't want to pay someone to have to come in and rebind them later on.
Right.
Anything further from council? Anything from the public? All right. All those in favor? And opposed?
Order passed, 7-0.
Next item?
Order 2011-51, Board of Assessment Review Amendment. This is a first reading, requires a roll call vote.
You should have in your packets an explanation. We included in there to, my understanding is just a change in where we located it in the section of the ordinance.
This will repeal one section that has some of its content and replace this with it.
There's no change in the text at all.
I thought they were changing it to allow term limits on, because there weren't any established at the time.
Not that I know of. At this point in time, this is just repealing some items that were done in error, I guess, and where they were located, and just adopting the corrected location within the document. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And
Yeah.
the article is on the next couple pages in your packet if you want to see where it's suggesting the changes.
This language was adopted at a different meeting prior.
Mark,
Yes.
just to comment on what Mr. Cody said, the term limits is in here under the section 2-574, where the terms it does say that there's a 3-year
We had
term.
we
We
had
talked about
discussion about it, that's why I
staggering
questioned
it.
it.
Didn't we talk about staggering it at one point?
Yeah,
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
why are we not doing that?
You are.
Well, it says, the initial appointment of 5 members shall be designated so that 1 shall be for 1 year, 2 shall be for 2 years, and 2 shall be for 3 years. Thereafter, all terms shall be for 3 years.
What was the discussion? There was something about that we wanted to change. It was simple, that we wanted to change on that.
I recall us having some discussion about it, which is what this is doing, so that you have the original appointments and then staggering them so that not all the terms expire at the same time. So then you keep some senior members on that, have some information about the previous doings, if you will, of the
I can't
assessment
recall what
review.
the topic was.
Yeah, the language was a little confusing, if I remember right, what we had before. And this seems to be clear to me.
I
that
think this was adopted when we did it in 2010 last time, we made the adjustment to the language at that point in time. Wrong piece under chapter 2 instead of putting it under division 12.
Right.
Right, so I think it's just a cleanup of the language.
This location, that's all. We're
Right,
not
yeah.
changing any language.
Right, just moving it to the correct section. Okay.
I would make a motion to accept.
I'll second it.
Okay. And I need a roll call vote for that, Twyla?
Yes. Counselor Bowie?
Yay.
Counselor Bickford?
Yes.
Counselor Cody?
Yay.
Counselor La Rochelle?
Yes.
Counselor Lunt?
Yes.
Counselor Mason?
Yes.
Counselor Pomelo?
Yes.
7 yeas, no nays, order passed.
All right, next item?
As under Order 2011-52, sign ordinance amendment, this is a second reading, roll call vote required.
Okay, do I have any discussion from council on that? This is the one we talked about before with the,
Yeah, the only
Timing
question I
change.
have is under section 7713, item A, authority. Should that read the town of Lisbon rather than just the town? I'm
Which
not
section was
sure
that
if
again?
there's any difference, but previously in other versions, it said the town of Lisbon.
I'm pretty sure the charter would say the town, referring, in all previous sections refers to the town of Lisbon, but I don't have the entire charter in front of me.
There's another place down at the bottom, it says the town also.
Okay. I'd make a motion to accept.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion from council before we vote? Anything from the public? Okay, I have a roll call vote on that, Twyla?
Okay, Counselor Pomelo?
Yes.
Counselor Mason?
Yes.
Counselor Lunt?
Yes.
Counselor La Rochelle?
Yes.
Counselor Cody?
Yes.
Counselor Bickford?
Yes.
Counselor Bowie?
Yay?
7 yeas, no nays, order passed.
All right, next item?
Order 2011-53, Lisbon Comprehensive Plan Update. This is its second reading. Roll call vote required.
Okay, do I have any discussions from council on that?
I'd make a motion to accept it.
I'll second it.
All right, any further discussion before we vote? Okay, anything from the public? All right. Take the roll call, Twyla?
Counselor La Rochelle?
Yes.
Counselor Lunt?
Yes.
Counselor Mason?
Yes.
Counselor Pomelo?
Yes.
Counselor Cody?
Nay.
Counselor Bickford?
Yes.
Counselor Bowie?
Yay?
6 yeas, 1 nays, order passed.
All right, next item?
Under other business, smart meters, Steve Daniels from Central Maine Power.
Mr. Daniels is here. They offered to make a presentation to the public to talk about smart meters before they start their implementation and installing them. Mr. Daniels, the podium is yours.
It's a little bit of show and tell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Steve Daniels, I'm from Central Maine Power. I've been employed there for about 25 years, and this is another change in technology that we're going through as we've seen in the past. We've changed from microfiche to computers, from horse and buggy to vehicles. We've had a lot of changes over the years, and this is another technology change. It's a new use of an old technology, radio. Radio frequency has been around for a long time. The meters that we're installing use radio frequency to communicate the usage at the facility, the home, the business, to us over the air wirelessly. But we started looking a few years ago. The federal government came out with the Energy Policy Act, where it encouraged all utilities to upgrade their electrical infrastructure to a smart grid technology. You hear a lot of terms: smart grid, smart meter, smartphone. All it means is that we have the ability to communicate to the equipment, and the equipment has the ability to communicate back to us. Now, we already have that at our substation level and our transmission level, but we don't have it down to the individual user level. These meters will give us that ability. After the Energy Policy Act from the federal government, the state came out with its own rules on energy, where it required electric utilities in the state to upgrade their infrastructure to smart grid technologies. After that, the Public Utilities Commission, who is our direct boss, had their piece of this where they directed utilities under their control to upgrade to smart grid technology. And so we proposed smart meters, which were the next technology change in our industry, to the PUC. They reviewed it and approved it and told us to move forward. We applied for a grant with the U.S. Department of Energy. We were lucky enough at the same time we were being directed to do this, the federal government came out with grants for utilities to upgrade to smart grid technology. And we applied for and received a grant for $96 million from the Department of Energy. That's approximately half the cost of the meter upgrade. The federal government puts in $96 million and CMP puts in the other $96 million. So we went out to bid for meters, and we got our bids back, all of which are wireless technology and all of which are digital. The electromechanical meters that you're familiar with, that we've had around for nearly 100 years, haven't changed a whole lot over that time period. They're a gear-driven piece of equipment. The new meters have no moving parts. They're digital, and they have a digital display. So how does this whole system work? Well, if you look at the first item on the right-hand side of your packet, you'll see a display of how the meters work. And if you start with a local or neighborhood area network, that's where the meters actually communicate with each other. My meter would send its signal and usage to your meter, which just reflects it off and sends it to another, which sends it to another, until it gets to a repeater up on our poles. And from there, it goes to a wide area network, and from there to the head-end system, where we have collectors at each of our service centers, and then that information is sent to our home office in Augusta for our computer system. Now, the items on the poles, if you look at page 2 on that, look very much like any other communication device you may see. The local area network is just on a typical standard utility pole, and then we try to get the wide area network collectors up higher on towers if they're available, so that we don't have to build them ourselves. In order not to do that, we're trying to find either other communication companies that have towers or even municipalities that have their own tower where we can lease space. And if you have space that you're interested in leasing, let us know, and we'd love to talk to you about that. From there, what does the meter look like? If you look on the last page, it looks just like the meter you have out there now, other than it doesn't have a spinning disc. It has a digital display with readings across the front. So that's how we got this far into the system. So what's the installation process? And Mr. Cody, if I may pick you, Counselor.
Good beat and post.
Good place to start. Let's say we're going to come do an installation at your house. The company that we hired to do the installation is called VSI. They're a Pennsylvania company, but they hire local people to do all their installation work. And they would come to the door. They carry an ID that says VSI and CMP on the ID. The trucks they drive, the vans they have say CMP and VSI on them, so they're very easily identifiable. They'll come to your door and knock on the door. Now, if you're not home, or if you're home and nobody answers the door, they'll go ahead and do the meter changeout. They'll go out and do the changeout. The whole changeout takes about 5 to 10 minutes. The process is they'll go up, they'll do a visual inspection of the meter and the enclosure. They'll open the seal, take the door off, take a picture, a digital picture of the meter to verify the final reading on the old meter, take the old meter out, put a new one in, take a picture of that, close it all up. Before they close it up, they test the voltage, make sure everything is working correctly, and they close it up and they're done. The actual time that the power is off is about a minute. Like I said, the whole process, 5 to 10 minutes. When they're done, they'll leave a door hanger like this hanging on your door. And this just says, hey, we were here today, we changed out the meter, that's why your microwave clock is blinking. If you have any questions, call us. If they run into any problems, they'll leave this orange door hanger there saying what the problem was, what they're doing, and call for information and set an appointment. Now, we identified in advance some places around our company where the meter enclosures, because of the age or condition of the enclosure, would not accept this new meter. And we hired local electricians to go out and change out those enclosures at our expense. As we go into deployment in an area, we identify, and we already have in our system, places where we know the meter is hard to access. It might be behind a fence, it might be in a garage, or they may have a big dog that doesn't like us. Whatever the reason, we know that there's going to be an issue getting into that location. So we send a postcard to that location asking them to call us and set an appointment so that we can get in and do the job. For businesses, anything that's non-residential, a commercial class business or a commercial class meter enclosure, the newer ones for the last 20 to 25 years have a bypass handle inside them, which means when you cut the seal and take off the door, there's a handle that can be thrown which will redirect the current around the meter. You can take the old meter out, put a new one in, close the handle back up, and then put the door back on and never interrupt service to the business. Now, not all businesses have these, and we recognize that. So we have a different postcard that we send out to those businesses and ask them to contact us for an appointment so we can do it at the least inconvenient time for them. So that's the process if you're not home. Now, let's say you are home. You come to the door, the VSI installer will identify themselves, at which point you have several options. You can say, sure, go ahead, and they'll go ahead and do the change-up. You can say, can you give me 10 minutes? Sure, no problem. Can you give me an hour? Sure, no problem. Can you come back this afternoon? Sure, no problem. Can you come back tomorrow? At that point, the installer will hand you a card and say, please call this number and set an appointment, because that installer doesn't know for sure if they'll be back there the next day or not in that area. So we ask you to set an appointment. Now, you have another option, and that is you can say, I don't want one. Please don't install one. The whole issue on whether there should be a opt-out for customers not to have a smart meter, that whole issue is in front of the Public Utilities Commission for decision. There were 2 bills in front of the legislature dealing with this that were tabled because there is an ongoing investigation by the PUC. Now, the PUC told us to get into this, and knowing that this was this type of technology, if they want us to do something different, they'll tell us. If they decide that there should be an opt-out, they also then have to decide what that opt-out should be. Does that mean you keep your old meter? Does it mean you get a meter that's relocated away from the facility, away from the house or the business, out on a pole? Does it mean that you get a smart meter that has its broadcast and receiver card removed so it doesn't act as a smart meter? You can't communicate with it. All of these different types of opt-outs, and I'm sure there are others that people have come up with, all have additional costs associated with them. If you have to run different systems, if you have to have additional people to staff doing manual reading of the meters, there are costs associated with that. The PUC will determine what those costs are and who has to pay for them if there is an opt-out. So that whole issue is in front of them, so you can say right now, no, I don't want one. You don't have to wait till we come to the door. You can call CMP's number, our 1-800 number, 750-4000. And you can say, you know, I'm so-and-so, I live at this address, this is my account, and it should be the person who is on the account who calls, and say, I don't want one. And you will get a temporary opt-out until the whole issue is decided by the PUC. You can do the same thing by going to our website and sending us an email saying that you want to opt out. Now, some people have been sticking notes on the meter. We don't advise doing that because we've seen in some areas where the weather has taken the notes off and we install the meter and then they call us and have us come back and take it out. We'd rather not do that. It's a lot more time consuming and expensive. So if they can use one of the other methods, that's preferable. But until the PUC decides, we'll honor that request. So that's what's happening there. the next question that always comes up is, are they safe? In your packet on the right-hand side is this chart, and it gives relative strengths of different types of devices that are commonly around the home. The smart meter itself uses 1/7,000th of the maximum FCC allowable transmission strength, 1/7,000th. It operates at most, for the meter that operates the most, is approximately 45 seconds a day or less. It is a very low strength. Now, you have other things that you're familiar with, I'm sure. This building probably has a wireless router. That is about 67 times stronger than the meter as far as its broadcast strength and radio frequency. You may have a remote control for your TV set. You may have a fob on your keychain to your car that unlocks your doors. All of those things use radio frequency. It's been around a long time. The other thing on the other end of the spectrum is a cell phone, which is more than 12,000 times more energy in its broadcast than a smart meter. So that gives you some relative strengths of different types of things. The whole issue on the safety came in front of the Public Utilities Commission, and they looked at all the evidence and decided that they would not investigate based on safety, that issue was dealt with by the FCC. There are letters in your packet from the FCC as well as from the Maine Center for Disease Control addressing smart meters and the safety of smart meters, and there is no evidence that they are unsafe. So that's how we respond to the safety question. The next issue is, why are we doing it? And if you look at this little green folder here, this one. Right now, customers can have a time of use rate, residential customers or business customers. Now, for business customers, there are suppliers out there, because as you recall, CMP is a delivery-only company. We don't have supply. You have to get your supply either from the standard offer through the Public Utilities Commission or through a private seller of supply. There are suppliers out there who offer time-of-use rates to businesses, but there isn't anybody offering it to residential customers. So even though you could have a time-of-use rate from CMP, by time of use, you pay different amounts for the energy based on the time of day and day of the week and time of year that you use it. There's not a big savings there for people without the supply piece tied into it. Once the system is in and operational, the PUC will go out for bids for time of use rates for residential customers. In areas around the country where they've already installed these meters, and there are about 30 million of these in service around the country right now, customers who take advantage of the time of use rate, monitor what they do, make some changes in how they do it, can typically save between 5 and 15% of their usage. Now, how are they going to monitor it? Well, we'll have a website in place so that you can go online with your account number and a password that you set up to CMP's website and look at your usage. We'll download the information every night after midnight, so we have day-behind usage. You can see spikes, valleys in your usage on an hourly basis, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, however you want to look at it. Once you understand what your usage is and what's driving it, you can choose, if you wish, to make changes in what you do to allow you to save on your bill. There's no requirement that you do. You can do nothing other than what you're doing right now. But there is that opportunity for people to do that. There are other things that will come along. There's a big push for electric vehicles. So there's off-peak charging. There'll be off-peak charging rates for electric vehicles. There'll be off-peak rates available for people to use storage heat and storage cooling so that they can heat when the price, charge their heating system when the price is at its lowest and then draw it back off when it's at the highest. The same with cooling. These are all things that will be coming down the road with the system in place to facilitate them. Another advantage is there'll be no more estimated bills. We'll have the reading every month, every day of every month. So it's not an issue. There won't be estimates. And you won't need to shovel a path to the meter enclosure after the system is up and operational, which will be early spring next year, 2012, when the entire company changes over. We're changing 620,000 plus or minus meters. We're doing specific areas, moving through those areas, doing the meter changeouts. We've installed over 175,000 meters so far. Here in Lisbon, you have 4,514 total meters, and we have 15 smart meters installed. They're not hooked to our information system. They're not broadcasting. We're reading them manually, but we stopped stocking the old meters. So if we have a new customer come in, or we have a meter that's damaged and has to be replaced, we're putting one of these smart meters in and just doing a manual read. And to date, 3 accounts have requested to be bypassed and not have a meter installed. The next thing, there's a green component to these meters. By not having to drive to every meter every month, we'll reduce our driving by over 2 million miles a year. That's a savings of about 1,500 tons of carbon dioxide. There's also an additional green component for homeowners who change their usage and save at their home. They're actually reducing their carbon footprint, and our website will allow you to look at your usage as a carbon footprint, and you can see changes there. Also on the website, there'll be a button you can click on and compare your usage as you are to time of use and see if there's a savings for you to do that. Now, that's only looking at your present usage pattern. It doesn't take into account anything you might want to do to facilitate additional savings. One of the biggest savings, biggest improvements in efficiency out of these meters is for outages. Right now, Councilor Cody, if we have an outage at your house, we don't know it unless you call us and tell us. Now, we know if a whole system is down, a substation or a major transmission line, because we have smart technology to that level, but not down to the individual user. So if you're not home and nobody's home and we don't get a call, we don't know it's out. It stays out until we're notified. Now, in the wintertime, that can be a real issue for some places, especially if it's a seasonal customer and they get freeze-ups, whatever that might be. Now, these new meters have what's called a last gasp. And what it means is that when the power goes out, they automatically, immediately send us a signal that lets us know they're out of power. When that happens, we can dispatch a repair crew directly to the location and make a repair. You don't have to be there to tell us that the power is out. We'll know it probably before you do if you're not home. Another thing in major outages, we'll say a tree comes down here, out here on the main drag and takes power out to the whole town. We would know that. What we wouldn't know is that just 5 minutes later, a tree came down at your house and ripped the service off. We come into town, we make repair on the main road, the lights in town come back on, we think we're all set, and we go on to the next outage, and you're still looking out the window going, why do my neighbors have power and I don't? Well, with this new system, when we restore power, the meters that don't come back on will automatically highlight on our system, and we'll know that we have to do repairs there as well, so that we can pick those up and not miss them and wait again for someone to call. We won't have to make calls in the middle of the night to see if your power has been restored. We'll know it. There's also a remote disconnect and reconnect feature on these meters, so that should you move out of a location and you want a final reading and you want the power shut off, you call us. You don't have to have an appointment for somebody to drive out there and get a final reading off that meter. We can take that reading right on the spot over the phone, and if you request, shut the service off. And then you call up to take service at that location, we can do the reverse and turn that power on at that location. So it has an additional savings in we don't have to drive to de-energize and re-energize services. That's what we're doing and why we're doing it. What are your questions?
All right, anyone on council have any questions first?
This is perfectly safe for people with pacemakers and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And I have
It's-
no problems.
It's approved by the FCC for this application. There are no problems. Now, my mom had a pacemaker, and when she had it installed, the only thing they told her was, use the phone on the other side and don't stand next to the microwave when you're running it. Follow your medical advice. If your doctor tells you, don't stand next to it, don't. I mean, you'd have to lean on the meter against your pacemaker in order for it to maybe interfere. At 3 feet away, the signal drops almost to nothing. So it drops by the distance.
And it doesn't have any effect on emergency alarms, burglar alarms, or anything like that.
We have had one case where there was an alarm system that was affected by it. We sent our technician out, and we were going to, and we offered to have a alarm company come in and take a look at the person's alarm system to find out why. They declined, so we just changed the meter out at that point. We've had another case where it interfered with a wireless router. If you have a wireless router here or at your home, you know it has multiple channels that you can choose. We sent a technician out, they changed the channel on the router, the interference stopped. If there is an issue, any kind of interference issue, contact us, let us know. We'll take care of it.
You gave a considerable amount of information about opting out.
Right.
Why would anybody opt out?
There have been a couple of different groups of people who have come forward with either health concerns or the fact that they just feel they should be allowed to choose something different than what we offer. That's what's in front of the Public Utilities Commission right now. They're not looking at it based on health or anything else. They're just looking at it saying, should someone have the option to choose not to have one of these meters? Our concern is that, as I told you, these meters communicate with each other, and if you have a large area where people opt out, you lose that communication piece. You don't have the outage information anymore, is one major concern. Another is that if you want it and you don't, you shouldn't have to pay someone else not to have it. You shouldn't subsidize that. That's been one of our points all along. There are some legitimate concerns out there, and some people just don't like change, and some people want it or don't want it. I mean, we've had people call us up and try to move up our deployment because they wanted it sooner. So I can't answer for everybody's reasons other than what they've published with the PUC.
And it would definitely lose quite a few jobs too, if I'm not mistaken.
There are 148 positions, meter reading positions, that will be eliminated as a result of this. Now, that's not all of our meter readers. We'll still have meter readers at our locations because we'll still have new customers coming in, or there'll be damages to meters that we'll have to replace. What we did was work with their union so that we then offered a early retirement for all of our union folks to create openings within the union that meter readers, which is an entry-level position for us, they could then train and move into. This is happening around the company at different areas as we deploy in those areas. Those that chose to could also take an enhanced severance package.
Laura, you had a question?
You made a lot of mention of being able to get onto the website and do some comparisons to your current usage or the time of day usage to what the smart meter option is. What we often hear is that not a lot of people, I shouldn't say not a lot of people, there are a handful of people that maybe don't have computer access. Would they be able to, from looking at their meter, be able to figure out any usage and be able to do any comparisons that way if they don't use the computer?
They could read the meter themselves if they want to. I mean, the data flashes across the screen. But the easiest way for them would be to call our customer service line, because we'll be able to look at that information right there online for them, even if they don't have access. And then we could answer their questions.
And what about the myths of the cost of your electric bill going up by having the smart meters?
That's been investigated multiple times, both by us and others. What we can assure people is that the new meters are much more accurate than the old ones are. The old meter had to be plus or minus 2%. inaccuracy by state law or by commission rule. The new meters are 0.02%. They are much more accurate. The older meters, because they're gear-driven, they have a tendency to slow down with age. That's why we change out, 15,000 meters a year under our old meter system, because they just slow down. The new meters don't. There are no moving parts to slow down.
Yeah, what kind of precautions do you have to prevent hacking into the system?
Our whole system has cybersecurity. That's not new to us. I mean, we have that in all of our equipment now at a larger level, at our substation level and higher. The whole issue on security is a very important one, and one that's driven by by FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, as well as by the Northeast Energy Reliability Council. They have certain standards that we have to meet, as we had to show that we could meet them for the grant application that we put in. So the data that comes from the meter is encrypted when it leaves the meter, so it's just your account number and your usage. Excuse me.
Anything further from council? You want to take questions from the public?
Absolutely.
Okay, anyone from the public have a question?
Excuse me.
Here we go.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My question, you said that if one person, say, for some reason I have a glitch and my power goes out, I'm envisioning a control room with all of these accounts. How would you know if one person in one town, one person in Harpswell or whatever, how do you know whether there's a power outage in 1 or 2 or 3 homes?
Now or with these meters?
With the new meters?
The meters send us a signal to let us know that they're out. That signal comes through to our control room and can be dispatched directly to a repair crew in the field.
There's somebody in the control room 24/7,
Yes, ma'am. Always, now and in the future.
and nobody asleep at the wheel?
No, no, we're not the FAA.
All right, who wants to go next?
Time of use rates, are they in place now
There is a,
for the general public?
yes, there are time of use rates in place now for both residential and commercial customers. However, for a residential customer, the only time of use rate available now is our delivery service. There isn't a supply service that's available under time of use. That will happen after these meters go into place.
And what's the blocks of time for the time of use?
Basically from 7 o'clock in the morning to noon, and then from 4 in the afternoon to 8 in the evening are on peak. From noon to 4 in the afternoon is what we call a shoulder or an interim period, and then after 8 o'clock at night to 7 the following morning is off-peak. Weekends are pretty much all off-peak, except in the wintertime. It's all on our website if you do have access. It explains it quite well. It draws it out in a chart for you.
The meters, when you were talking about land and leasing, communications, so that would leave maybe some to believe that the whole system as an entirety isn't completed or thought out for the collection of the reads of the meters. You guys, the collector system, is that not completed? Is that fully functioned? You guys know that those meters are actually pulling it in? You have to reflash meters to fix what's not reading? How is that all a whole?
As we move into each area, they go into that area, the contractor that we have, our communications contractor, and they look at the different areas as to what will be needed for repeaters, what will be needed for collectors, and where they can go. Now, it doesn't have to go right there. Maybe it could go right there instead. So you've got some room to move around. Plus, there's redundancy built into the system so that if one goes down, others fill in around it. Right. So even though it might be designed for a much greater number of meters to report through it, we use a lower number so that we have that redundancy. They have an idea of where everything will go, but they know, because it's radio frequency and it's line of sight, if you're going into a town and you can get on a tower that's the highest point in town, that's the best place to be. So you don't, they'll still do their calculations, but that's pretty much a no. And that's developed as we move into each area.
Right, so it's pretty much your guys' satellite zones where you're gonna be receiving when the collector systems is kind of set up as they're being installed.
That's correct. And then those come to our service centers that we have now. For example, there's one in Lewiston, there's one in Brunswick, the two local ones in this area.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am?
Have you considered open houses for people to come in and check out your service centers so that people can see how it works and maybe, people are afraid of the unknown.
Mhm.
And educating people is the wisest thing to do, to dispel that.
I'll answer that two ways. Yes, we have considered it, and there are limitations as to what we're allowed to have people, the areas we're allowed to have people enter. Our control room is off limits. We're not allowed to have people in there. I can't even go in without an escort, even though I've worked for the company for 25 years. That's all came about after 9/11 and all the security measures that have been put into place since then. At the service center level, yes, that could be done. And I would,
Video presentations.
with what can be shown. I mean, we can't even give out maps anymore that we used to be able to provide people of our system. But I'll pass that along. That's a good idea. Thank you.
Any further questions?
My question is, sir, Stannis, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I totally reject your carbon footprint situation where you're referring to reduction of carbon. In the 80s, it was acid rain. In the 90s, it was nuclear winter. And now we're back to carbon. Well, carbon is used by plants to provide oxygen and help to forgive you. You do say that it will reduce 2 million miles of driving. So the automobile manufacturers that provided vehicles to you now will suffer, and the people that service those vehicles will now suffer for that. That's fine. With all this savings that you are now reducing the 2 million miles, will the customer's bill reflect those savings? Instead of paying, let's say in my case, I pay about $70 a month, will my bill actually be reduced because of your savings? Because you're not driving as many miles, you're not buying vehicles, you're not repairing vehicles. Will customers' bills be reduced because of the savings you are now realizing?
To answer your question, yes. As our operational costs decrease, the customer's bill goes down. That's a direct reflection in the bill. However, as I also said previously, CMP is investing $96 million into this. The initial savings that we see pay us back for that investment over the next 15 to 20 years. So we'll recover our investment over time. The real savings opportunity for the customer is in the other items that I mentioned, for them to take advantage of the way the meters operate.
That was my third point. Now, Franklin Rains has a patent for an outlet that sticks into the wall that microchips to the smart meter, that if in fact there comes an order from the EPA to shut down the grid, not even a problem regarding terrorism or something like that, that eventually you're going to progress to that outlet cover that has a microchip for the smart meter, and you, and not yourself, but if the EPA or the government says shut down the grid, that they can do it without even telling you. They just do it electronically, that everything's shut down. You're going to cause loss of life, because a lot of people are on oxygen and different things that they have to have medicine for, like for diabetes. And I reject the government's involvement with my electricity. That me and CMP should have that relationship. The government with the installation of a smart meter, and eventually you will progress to that point where you will microchip our home through our outlets. At any point, you can shut us down, and you have, when you talk about safety, you're talking about human beings' lives. Because that's what you say. You go from Pony Express to smartphones to smart meters, and eventually people are going to be, we're talking loss of human lives. So when you say the PUC is determining the opt-out thing, it needs to be a little bit more detailed than that, because you should say, okay, this is what's gonna happen today, but you should say what's gonna happen 5 or 10 years from now too, that eventually it will progress to the government knowing whether your computer's on, what channel you're on the TV, whether your refrigerator's running or your microwave's running. And they will know everything that's going on in your house, every light bulb you have turned on, because that's going to talk to the smart meter. And the smart meter's gonna talk to the people at the EPA. Again, I go back to, in the 80s it was acid rain, in the 90s it was nuclear waste, and now it's carbon. The government is trying to control people. And that is one way to do it, through the electrical way, because then they know what you're doing and what appliances you're using. But it's not funny, because it's like...
All right, thank you, ma'am. Do you have a question, or?
That was my question.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
What is this progressing to? The smart
The
meter?
meter doesn't, the meter functions the same way as the meter that's there now, in that it measures electricity that goes through it. It doesn't know what it's being used for on the other side. Please allow me to finish. It doesn't know what's being used on the other side. I have no idea what you're talking about with the digital device in the chip. I hadn't heard of that. It could be out there. We're not involved in that. If there is a decision by our government to do something, others make that determination. We don't. All we're doing is measuring the electricity that goes in. Now, we've always had the ability to disconnect the grid, and we've done it. We get calls from your fire department saying there's a line down on a car, kill this circuit, and we do it. Now, are there ramifications from doing that? Sure, businesses are out of power, people's homes are dark, but it's a safety first issue. So we've always had that ability. What this will do is give us the ability to do it down at a less intrusive level, so that if they call us and say, it's the line on this road, maybe we can go to the individual location. If the fire department calls us and says, hey, we've got a flooded basement at this address, can you kill this meter? And we can do it remotely. We will. But we're still going to send somebody out there to make sure it's dead from the pole in, because that would just de-energize it from the meter in. I don't know about any government conspiracy or long-range plans other than what I've told you, and that's where I'll have to drop that.
Thank you. All right, sir?
Real quick, two-fold question.
Yes, sir.
When you said you sent the meters out to bid, did you do that as CMP or as FPL for every company that they own?
We're not connected to FPL. Florida Power and Light,
Service provider, then you purchase meters?
that's correct. Florida Power and Light bought our generation.
Right.
That's the only connection we had to them. We went out to bid as Central Maine Power, because these meters are not yet installed at other parts of our corporation. So.
The local Maine company got that contract, or who got the contract?
Well, GE in New Hampshire makes a large percentage of these, and Landis and Gear makes another percentage of them.
Go ahead.
There's a lot of negative publicity, and I understand that, and I don't sway either way.
Mhm.
Don't matter. But for the people that are concerned, I know CMP is really big with customer service, polite, courteous.
That's why I'm here.
That's right. Yeah, there is a lot of negative publicity between public word of mouth, media, or newspaper, whatever it may be. But really haven't seen too much of CMP actually fighting back against. They caused radiation with Alicia Boxer in Scarborough.
Mhm.
Every case. Is there a plan for that? Because that would make the technicians' lives a lot easier when they're at their house.
I'm sure it would. There is a plan. This is part of the outreach from that plan. Until the issue is really decided at the PUC, we're going to hold off any mass media, because it doesn't make sense to tell everybody we're going to do it one way and then have them change their mind, and then we got to go back at home, we're going to do something else.
Right.
So, yes, there is. It's a short answer.
So in other words, the opt-out also is in the same situation. For now, it's temporary.
Mhm.
So.
That's correct. Sir?
So if you have one on my house like tomorrow,
Mhm.
does it switching, do I switch into the differential pay status, or does it stay the same until Sunday?
It stays the same until you choose to change it. It's a voluntary program. It's optional. There's no requirement to be time of use. Right, you can stay just the way you are now. If you're not time of use, there's no requirement for you to change to that. But that's where the savings lie.
All right, thank you. We appreciate your showing up here tonight.
Our deployment in this area will be this summer, probably towards the end of summer. We'll give you a call as we get close to the deployment time, just to confirm the date and time when we'll start in town. And if you or any of your residents have any questions, contact us. All this information I gave you tonight is on our website, www.cmpco.com. So that also in there and in your packet, there's typical questions and answers. And every time we get a new one, like from this lady tonight, about having a open house at our service centers, that'll go in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item, Paula?
Is the Finance Director's report.
Hello. Okay, beginning with revenues for the month of March. Excise tax were approximately 66% collected. Last year, for the month of March, we took in 115,000. This year, we've taken in almost 109,000. As brought to your attention last month, year-to-date, it's looking like we will be under-collected by upwards of 80,000. This is because in order to meet our current budget, we would have to bring in 138,000 per remaining month. And even though collections do increase this time of year, historically, we have not collected over 130,000 in the months remaining, so something to keep an eye on. State revenue sharing is 75% collected, with another 31,000 that came in during the month. Last year at this time, we were only 59% collected on our budget of 1 million. So to achieve our budget of 750,000, we would need to average 62,000 for each of the remaining months, and we'll continue to monitor for that level. It's subjective. The transfer station brought in another 9,000. We are now 77% collected at a year-to-date total of 97,000. So things are moving along there. We are over 110% collected on our parks and recreation revenue. The month of March brought in another 1,300 in the before and after school care programs that are offered through the rec department, as well as 1,600 for the winter spring swim program that they offer. And as of March 31st, we are 93% collected on our total tax commitment for the year, which is right where we were at this point last year. Are there any questions with revenue?
Go ahead, Mike.
I have a couple. On line 4025.
I'm sorry, on what?
4025 under general government. Can you explain what's going on there?
Sorry, I seem to have lost my sheet. On the clerk fees?
No, it's cash over short.
Oh, 4025.
Yes.
I did not notice that on the report. I will report that to you next month. I apologize, I didn't see that line on there. Sorry.
And what's on 4173? What's happening here?
In our initial budget, we had budgeted for revenues from the water department for the bond with them, and that will not be coming through the revenue. That will be because they pay their bond. Initially, it was thought that it would go through us and they would pay us, but they're making the payment and it offsets the expense as opposed to through the revenue.
So what does that do to our overall, so that means we're going to be short in our revenues by that
Correct.
amount?
So we're losing the same on expenses, correct? It's not going through us.
The bond payment's not in. Go ahead.
No, it will show through, it's been accounted for in the expense side.
Yeah.
How about line item 4030 under public safety? Are we going to make that particular revenue projection? Or is this just timing?
Part of it could be due to timing. This is, I'd have to look more into the detail at that level.
And how about 4031? Is that just timing?
Yes, it is.
Just need another payment?
Yeah.
And will we also make 4035?
Under public safety, right? Yep.
Yeah.
Considering that we're not even 50%, probably not.
And under Public Works, 4150.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, we won't make that one either, right? The permits have already been.
Well, right, unless someone new comes to town, then it's a prorated amount, so the chances of bringing 1,800 in 2 months, probably not.
And how about 41, which one is it? 4156. Should we be concerned with that one?
When initially doing this budget, last year, the 100 for Public Works, which is really the solid waste, when compiling the budget last year, it was a flat 125,000 in one line item. In doing it this year, what I tried to do was say, okay, we did bring in 125,000. This is what that was. This is where things were coded last year to make up that 125,000. So that's what I budgeted for at that level so that we could see this on a line-by-line item breakout. It's still subjective and will be tweaked to how they code things, because my understanding is that mixed paper, newspaper, and the paper line are really all one and the same. And I'm not sure why all the accounts were set up, but that's the way they got coded last year. So that's what I made the budget to based on last year's numbers. This year, it looks like they're coding almost all paper to the mixed paper line, because you'll see we're over collected in that. So you'll see ups and downs within this section because I was trying to give you more breakout, and you'll notice the same thing under public service. Under public services for the rec department. Last year it was all 60,000 on one line. We really weren't being held accountable per program or item. So all I was trying to do was blow that budget out and say this is where it was based on last year's expenditures. But in total, which is why when I speak to the solid waste, I speak to it in total that they brought it in just because it's subjective per line to where they code things because of the number of accounts that they have access to code to.
So we anticipate hitting 125,000
Yes.
in total, from a total perspective. And on your second page, under general assistant, 4011, have we submitted anything here so that we get any?
I haven't heard anything that we would be receiving that.
I mean, we've paid out money, right?
Right.
Right.
So we should
And
be
every
getting
month,
our
we
50.
submit our request for reimbursement. State's a little slow. I don't even believe we've seen last year's
Correct.
payment.
Pushing it in any way? I mean, we're
We're
3/4
requesting
of the
it.
way through the year here,
Right.
and we haven't seen anything.
So,
So, I
confident
mean,
we'll get the money, so it's just a matter of when.
That's all I have.
Any other questions?
I actually have one more question. You might have already said this, but under the 4010 line, general government state revenue sharing, did you say that you were expecting to get that 185,000 that's uncollected?
It would not be unusual for us to collect on average 60,000 a month for the remaining months. So yes, but I was just giving you an idea of what we would have to average over the next 3 months to make it. But yes, I have no reason to believe that we wouldn't. Anything else? All right, looking at the expense side, we are overexpended on legal charges, as stated last month. However, historically, every budget year, we have been overexpended in this line for, I believe, at least over 20 years that I know of. We are overexpended in the town buildings, repair and maintenance building account by 11,000, primarily due to the roof leaks at the MTM Center. And this account is looking to be overexpended by at least 16,000 by year end due to some pending invoices that relate to the MTM roof leaks and the roof repairs at the fire station.
Which one was that?
It's under town engineer, and it falls, you have it in summary, but it's the repair and maintenance line under town engineer. In total, the town engineer is, they're not overexpended, but they have a couple line items that were. So I'm just, even though you get it in summary, I'm trying to give you a little insight to the detail of certain lines that may be overexpended. It's the 03300, if that helps. Also in the, or I'm sorry, that was the town building. I read the wrong line. So that's the 01140, which again, on the summary level, you won't see. In the town engineer's budget, which is the 03300, they do have unexpended dollars because of the walking path bond money, but they are overexpended by 11,000 in one of their lines due to the contaminated well issue.
So, just a question on that. Why are we putting the bond money in with the individual departments like that? Why wouldn't that go under the bond line that we have? Why don't we separate those out?
It runs through his department.
Right, but it can only be used for certain stuff, so it shouldn't be laid in there to make it look like we're potentially favorable, right, because there's a lot of bond money there, and not be able to see where we really stand at the total budget level just for that department.
The accounts are set up that way, and the money, I think based on the nature of the project of how quickly, I guess, it was going to be drawn down. It went through there, and it's a carry forward item, so the bond payments itself go through the 10-100. But the proceeds from it hit the individual departments.
Go ahead, Vern.
So, under that, the bonds, under capital outlay, that remaining 277, 746, what is that? Is that a specific bond, or is that actually the,
Those are our payments, our
Those are-
those are
principal
the payments we
and
have to
interest
pay for
payments.
so
all
we
the
have to
bonds.
pay, okay.
Yep.
But the other bond that's in the town engineers is not calculated into that line, is that what you're saying?
Well, it's in that line
Yeah.
for the bond payment.
Right.
The money that he has to
The
spend
proceeds of the
on
bond.
the activities he's gotta do
Hmm.
is what's buried in that line, or placed into that line, which I'm assuming is the majority of the 299,000 that was, done as a budget adjustment.
So under that, the idea of the money that we had left over from the bond for doing the road repair, would that be under a different line? Because since that was a carryover, would that be under the same circumstance in public works, under roads, or, I mean, I'm just kind of curious.
That one was set up before my time, but that one is actually under the 09-900.
So help me out for a second on this one. The town engineer, 0300, right, is 39,555,
Yep,
right? And if we didn't add the budget adjustment, which is really the bond,
yep,
right, we have a year-to-date net of 82,328.
mm-hmm.
Now, does that include bond payments, that 82?
Any bond payments?
Not the payment of the debt service, but
Payment for
of
bond work,
expenses of that money.
yes.
So we don't know how much of that, so I can't get to how close we are to the 39,555.
Let's see. On the bonds, let's see, year-to-date, this encompasses the bike trail, the Androscoggin River Trail, and the Route 9 water line. We've expended maybe 45,000. So unexpended is about 250.
I could take 45,000 off the 82,
Mm-hmm.
and that would leave me 37, right?
Mm-hmm.
And change.
Mm-hmm.
So we're favorable by about $2,000 right now in that particular budget.
Yes.
Okay. I just think it's confusing throwing the
Well,
bond money into
the
the
funding,
individual
also the funding for the wells that we're doing isn't coming out of our operating budget. That is coming out of undesignated fund balance because it's an emergency allocation to correct. If we don't have any money.
Well, where's the expense showing up?
Expenses showing up in Ryan's account, in
The town engineer.
town engineer account.
For the
And
contaminated.
we don't know that it's coming out of undesignated until the end of the year.
Until they make the adjustment.
You may not need it if you underrun
Right.
whatever that cost may have been.
Yeah. And we still have 3 more to do, so.
Any other questions? All right,
I think that's all set, yep.
thank you.
Thank you. Next item, Twyla?
Revaluation discussion.
Mr. Van Tynen is here to just go through the revaluation process so you have a better idea and so the public knows as we move through the budget process, hoping to get that into our budget.
Thank you, Mr. Van Tynen.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I guess first and foremost, I just want to emphasize what the purpose of a revaluation is, what the goal of a revaluation is. And the purpose of a revaluation is to try to make sure that everybody is assessed at a reasonable estimate of just value. That's the definition that's used in the state statute, and it essentially means market value.
Guys in the back, please, we're trying to have, could you quiet down back there? Someone has the floor, okay? I'd like you to respect that. Go ahead, Mr. Van Tynen.
So the whole goal of a revaluation is to try to is one of fairness, one of equity, to try to make sure that everyone is paying their fair share of property taxes based on a reasonable estimate of market value. Property taxes are a fact of life. That's what towns have to gather most of the revenue that they need to operate from. And the idea is to try to raise that revenue as fairly and equitably as possible. There certainly is no goal or purpose in a revaluation in trying to find new sources of revenue. That's not the purpose of a revaluation at all. The budget of a town is set by the various legislative bodies, the town council, of school board, the county commissioners, and they develop their budgets. From those budgets, there's a deduction for other revenue, state municipal revenue sharing, excise taxes, whatever the other sources of revenue of the town are. And the town council really sets the budget and determines how much money needs to be raised by taxation. The revaluation doesn't affect that amount. It raises that amount that the town decides to raise by revenue. It may have an effect on who pays what. If someone 20 years ago or so, when the last revaluation was done, had a house that was pretty deteriorated, was pretty worn out, and gradually, over time, it's been remodeled, it's been updated, it's been improved, new windows, new kitchen, and those kinds of things were not picked up in the regular tax assessment routine of the town. That kind of gradual improvement will be recognized in a revaluation. And that particular property or that type of property might see somewhat of an increase in their taxes. Conversely, a house that might have been in pretty good shape 20 years ago and has been neglected, and the roof hasn't been replaced, and there's been leaks, and it's more considerably run down than it was many years ago, that would be recognized in a revaluation as well. That's the type of change that certainly is likely to be missed in the just routine day-to-day maintenance of tax assessments over time. That type of property might see a decrease in its taxes because it's gone downhill relative to the rest of the town. But there's no effect on the overall taxes of the town. In some communities, certain types of property, certain neighborhoods, over time may increase or decrease in value more or less than others. I think it was in 2008, I did a revaluation of China, Maine. China has 3 freshwater ponds and lakes. And those ponds and lakes, the properties located on them, increased in value since the last revaluation, considerably more than non-waterfront property. When ratio studies were done of assessed values to sales prices, the waterfront ratios were about 70%. The non-waterfront ratios were about 70%. The waterfront ratios were about 50%. So to bring everything up to 100% of value meant that there was going to be a bit of a shift from non-waterfront property to waterfront property. There certainly are situations where that type of adjustment occurs with a revaluation because property values increased unevenly on different classes of property in the town over time. So that the purpose of a revaluation, just to summarize real quickly, is to be fair and equitable, value people according to the value of what they own. And I'm just going to go very quickly over the process, the various steps of a revaluation. One step is sales analysis. You have to look at all the sales that have occurred in the town over a 2 or 3 year period of time. You try to model your appraisal schedules consisting of land schedules, building cost schedules, depreciation schedules based on those sales. You try to develop the appraisal guidelines, the appraisal schedules from local sales. The process that you use is called sales ratio analysis, where you test your schedules against the sales, you retest them, you modify them, you retest them, you modify them, until you you arrive at the best fit that you can, where you feel most confident that your appraisal schedules applied to the data that you've collected in the field corresponds as closely to sales as you can make them correspond. A real big part of a revaluation is called measuring and listing. Sometimes it's called data collection, where we go out in the field, we collect information about each property on what's called a property record card. That is a checkoff system where you collect a lot of information about the buildings, about the land, the number of bathrooms, the amount of the extent of the basement, the type of foundation, the type of siding, the number of rooms, all the kinds of type of heating system, the same type of information that a typical buyer would be looking at when they're looking at a house. And you make a sketch of the building, you take a photograph of the building, and you try to get a good inventory of property characteristics with current, newly collected information about each property. One of the limitations that your town has right now is that the information on your property record cards is old. It was gathered, I believe, in 1989. Another part of the process is callbacks, where we try to get inside of as many houses as possible. Property owner doesn't have to let us inside of their house, but we try to collect good, accurate information with interior information whenever we can. So if we don't find somebody at home after making 2 attempts to do so, we leave either a callback notice, similar to what the Central Maine Power gentleman described a little earlier, or we send a letter. If it's somebody where the house is obviously occupied, we'll probably just leave a callback, something on the doorknob. If it's something where it looks like it's not occupied or it's not owner occupied, we'll probably send a letter, just because it's easier to contact that person by letter, and the door hanger may just stay there for a long time. Then we load all of that information that we collect into the computer system. And we perform a preliminary valuation estimate based on that information. The sketch is put in the computer. It's a digital sketch that's kept in the computer, linked with the property record information, so it's all in one place. A digital photograph is linked to the property record so that it's right there, it's visible on the computer, it's all kept in one place. And all of the information about the land and the building is kept on that computer record. We would do a similar data collection process on commercial and industrial buildings. We'd visit the commercial industrial buildings, collect information about the structures, sketch the structures, and in many cases, we'll supplement that with some income and expense information. We'll send questionnaires asking for rental information, expense information, vacancy information on someone that might have an apartment house or a strip shopping center, to try to be able to obtain information where we can look at the valuation of that property, not just from a cost approach and from comparable sales, but also consider the income approach to value as well. We would do that with mobile home parks too. They're certainly an important income producing property that you have in your town. Then we do a review. We just don't let the computer mechanically generate a value. We try to look over those values very carefully and make sure that the value is a reasonable estimate of value based on sales in each neighborhood in town, and to make sure that there's a reasonable relationship in value from one property to another. There's really two standards. One standard in property tax assessment administration is that you have a reasonable estimate of market value, or at whatever percentage of market value you are at. And the other standard is that like property be treated alike, that you use the same approach, you use the same set of standards on all the properties, all the similar properties in town. It might be reasonable to use a different approach on a mobile home park than you use for a single-family home because of the nature of the differences in the property. But like property should be treated alike. And then we would appraise personal property as well. Business, not residential personal property. Residential personal property, your household furniture and fixtures, that is all exempt from taxation. But business personal property is largely taxable. There's certain exemptions, but the personal property in a store, the personal property in a restaurant, personal property in an insurance office, those kinds of things are taxable personal property, and we would appraise that business personal property. And then we do what are called informal hearings, where we send people the valuation that we have developed for their property. We give them an estimate of what the tax bill will be based on that new valuation. We usually do that based on the current year's budget. And if we indicate on that notice that if they have questions, they can call and schedule an appointment for a review of the information on their property with a member of our tax appraisal team, ask questions, review the information, make sure it's accurate. And if there are some issues that need to be addressed, we will try to agree on what needs to be reviewed. Sometimes that might be you didn't get inside the property the first time. I was in Florida over the winter. We'd like you to come and take a look at the property. Or we'd like to have you take another look at the property. We think what you call the full basement isn't a full basement. It's a little less than full. We'd like to show you in a little more detail. So we try to agree on what we're going to follow up on, and we try to follow up on all of those items. And if there are changes or not changes, we notify the property owner so they're up to date on what the change has been. That's how a revaluation works. That's what's done. That's the purpose of a revaluation. And I'll be happy to answer any questions the best I can.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Matinick? Go ahead, Lori.
Actually, one of the things that you had said about the valuations, if a home was in good repair 20 years ago and it's gone down, or the opposite, would it be fair to say if people pulled proper permits over the years for new roof, new windows, new decks, new whatever it is to update the structure, then really the adjustments to the value of their property, if they've improved their property, should already be there? So there shouldn't be a significant change?
If you require permits for a number of those things, that perhaps would minimize the amount of change. However, and I'm just being very realistic as a person who does the kind of work that I do. A lot of towns that I work in, probably most towns that I work in, don't require permits for things like a new roof. Don't require permits for something like new siding. Certainly don't need permits for painting. So some of that stuff may not make it to the permit level. In addition, sometimes in my day-to-day tax assessment work, if I see that a house has been painted, my inclination is to say that owner is just maintaining their house. It's not a big deal. It's not something where I'm going to change the value. Now, there are times when it's a night and day difference, where that's not the case. There might be a place that had asphalt shingles on the outside. And 2 years ago, the property owner was saying, my house is really run down. It has asphalt shingles on the outside. It's the least attractive house in the neighborhood. You have it too high. And if they take those asphalt shingles off and put on beautiful wood clapboards and it transforms the place, I'm going to probably notice it. But on a lot of those cases, I'm not. It's not going to be that transformational kind of change. I'm going to look at it as just maintaining the building. Maybe 2 years later, that same property owner who painted the house puts on a new roof. And I, again, conclude it's not a big deal. But after 20 years, the incremental year-to-year change has been more than just a little change. And it means that that house that was maybe in less than average condition 20 years ago is in better than average condition now. So I think the kinds of things that you mentioned might minimize the change, but I honestly think that there still will be the kinds of changes that occur that don't require permits, or that individually were looked at as not being major enough to require a tax assessment revision in any particular year.
Okay. The second question I had was, you were talking about the sales ratio analysis, where the value of homes is down right now. I mean, the market is low, the values are down. Is that going to have a negative value, negative impact on doing a revaluation now or over the next couple of years?
Not really, because the purpose of a revaluation is not to arrive at a particular value. It's to be realistic and fair and equitable compared to what the level of valuation is at a particular time. So if in 2011 you do a revaluation and the values are a little bit less than they were in 2010, that's not an issue. The issue is we want each property to be accurately valued according to its current market value in 2011. It doesn't have to be an increase from 2010. The idea is that the valuation should be fair according to current market value and accurate based on current information about the particular house.
I hear what you're saying about if everybody's values are compared in a certain year, but I'm thinking, like, if you have a neighborhood, let's say, where there's been foreclosures and the value of the sale is a lot less than if somebody just sells their house outright because of a foreclosure or a short sale, doesn't that pull the value in that area down?
We're dealing with more foreclosures, unfortunately, than has been the case typically for all of my lifetime, or all of the time that I've been working as a tax assessor anyway. They're more common. And generally speaking, appraisers don't give a lot of weight to foreclosure sales. Not all the time. I mean, sometimes a bank or an individual forecloses on a property and works very, very hard to repair any damage that might have resulted during the foreclosure process. It takes a while. Damage is not uncommon because of bad feelings by the person being foreclosed on, because of freeze-ups and things that occur in houses because it just takes a while for the repossession process. But sometimes the new owners fix any damage and try to sell it very, very diligently. And I think with an adequate amount of time. And I think in that situation, you have to perhaps give some weight to the foreclosure sale. Very often, what happens in a foreclosure sale is that damage to a property wasn't fixed up. It's sold where is, as is, with a lot of damage or unknowns, where the buyer doesn't know whether, when he turns the plumbing on, whether there's going to be leaks all over the place or whether it's going to be good. You just have to take that risk. And sometimes they're sold in a real quick way, with a quick foreclosure auction. One day, it's gone. And most appraisers don't give those sales much, if any, weight. For tax appraisal purposes, the main revenue services, when we fill out what's called a turnaround document, where we give them information on sales in the town, they ask us to disqualify those as being arm's length transactions and benchmark indicators of value.
Thank you.
Anything further from council?
I guess I have just one question. If we're gonna do this over time, rather than a big bang type approach, and then say it takes us 4 years to do it, I mean, how valuable is the information we did the first year when we get to the end in the 4th year?
I understand that point, and you know, you're probably a little bit too large of a town for anybody but a very large contractor with a lot of people to measure and list in 1 year. I think many revaluation contractors would look at the size of your town and say, really, it's a 2-year job. So you are talking about some of the information being a little older by the time it's utilized to implement the revaluation than it would be if it was done in a 2-year typical revaluation cycle. But it's going to be a whole lot better than information that is now 22 years old. I mean, some of the information collected in the first year of, say, a 4-year project, it's not going to be a year old, but it's going to be a whole lot better and a whole lot more accurate than the information that the town office has on file now. But you have a point.
But do you put yourself in a mode of where you're constantly having to go back then to try and stay caught up or whatever? I mean, because you've got that 3 or 4 year duration. I mean, so you have to go back and look at those 1-year properties to see if they can, and then the 2-year properties to see if you can get them up to speed with everything, or aren't you in like a constant cycle that way?
I certainly wouldn't try to do it that way. I mean, if we go out and do...
But I mean, I'm just trying to think of it from the standpoint that we want this to be, right, at the end of the day, we want to have a fair, right, setup, and that, you know, if, you know, my house was done the first year and Lori's was done the 4th year, right? I mean, what's the weighted value there or whatever, so that people aren't saying we didn't really do it fairly.
I want to make one thing clear, and I don't know whether this is your point or not, and the only way I can clarify it is to comment on it and ask it. I wouldn't be in a situation, and I want to be very, very clear on this, where if we did a job over time, 4 years, that in the first year, we would be collecting information and valuing those properties based on the market value in that particular year. And then going to another segment of the town and valuing the property in that area of the town at the values in that particular year, and so on down the line. So that some of the values would have, let's say, 2012 values, and some would have 2015 values. That's not what we would do. We would collect the information in a uniform way, and we would update all of the values at the same time in the final year of the project.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
So there might be
But I
something
wanted you to say.
Yes.
where someone added a roof since the first year of the project. Maybe that roof goes undetected. But that's all. Everybody would be valued at the same time, at the same effective date, with the same time frame of sales used to develop that valuation in the final year of the revaluation. Otherwise, it wouldn't be doing what it's supposed to do.
I'm good with that.
Anything further from council?
But I wanted everybody.
Do you have any questions or comments from the public?
I do.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Like the stock market then. Right now, if we could have it done right now, this year, boom.
Make him go to the podium.
Everything's dropped 10% nationwide, I heard it on the news. So 4 years, 3 years down the road, if they can control the gas and stuff, and oil, so everything goes up. After last year, everybody's taxes were double. Because it's a good market, everything just shot up throughout the years.
No.
No. The idea is that
To the end, to
Listen to
evaluate
it.
everybody with the information. You're gonna take it at the last year, and you could hit hard.
I have no idea what the market value is going to be
No, it's
in
a
4 years. I don't know whether it would be very similar to what it is now, a little bit more, a little bit less, whole lot more, whole lot less. I don't know. But the idea is to value everybody on the same basis during the same period of time, based on simply current, accurate information on each individual property and based on a good analysis of recent sales. If the values go up and the budget stays the same, the tax rate goes down. Doesn't mean your taxes go up. If the valuations go down, it doesn't mean your taxes go down, because the tax rate, if you spend the same amount of money, has to go up to raise what you need to run the town.
This is true, but I've seen Auburn and Boston where people know things, but prior loans, before they matured, they evaluated the town, the cities, and then when they came back, they said to the city, wow, you don't have enough money to pay your debt, because you have these deferred loans. So they just said, they just raised everybody's taxes. I mean, most towns are ready to spend money wastefully. And then they can make an adjustment at the end. If the budget seems to work, we can increase for what they want at the end. That's what I've seen across in a lot of these towns and stuff. Valuations never come out what they want. It's easy to race and make it right.
I hope we try to be a little bit more responsible here than some cities have been, you know. I mean, we're a small town and we all know each other and we feel the effects more than a bigger city. Mike, you have a
Right,
comment?
I mean, the important piece to remember, right, I mean, I've been saying this for years, but, right, you want to minimize your debt, you want to keep your expenses down as best as possible whenever you're going through a reevaluation process, right? Auburn, as you mentioned, they didn't do that, right? They did a reevaluation, they added over $1 million or $2 million to their normal expenses, right? And of course, everybody's taxes are going to go up, regardless of how your sales ratio came out or everything, right? Because you're increasing your overall expenditures. They went out and borrowed money to build parking garages, right, and all kinds of stuff, and increased all their expenses, right? That's not the right way to go about having to do a reevaluation, right? We have to be diligent about it, and we have to keep our expenditures as reasonable as possible and provide the services to the town at the same time as we're going through this.
Councilor Bowie, I couldn't agree with you more. If a town can have its budget in the year that a revaluation is implemented as close as possible as it was to the year before, it really simplifies things, because, I mean, some people, as a result of a revaluation, are going to see an increase, some are going to see a decrease, some aren't going to see much change at all. But if the town is raising 20% more in taxes than it was the year before, most everybody's going to see an increase. You'd have to have a tremendous decrease in your relative valuation as a percentage of the town of your individual property for you to see a tax decrease when the total tax bill of the town is going up 20%. And when I mentioned earlier that in most cases we try to send out a valuation notice that includes an estimate whenever we can of what your taxes will be with the current budget, the times when I've shied away from doing that is when a town has a big increase in their budget. And I have, in a couple of cases, sent out notices just so that people are aware of the impact of the spending increase separate from the impact of the revaluation. I've sent out some notices in some cases that were based on the previous year's tax commitment and said, this is an estimate of what your tax bill would be based on the new valuation and last year's tax commitment, so that people can see the impact of the revaluation separate from the impact of the general tax increase.
Thank you, Bill. Any further questions?
I just had one comment, which is important to keep in mind, as Mike was saying, where another community may have done the revaluation and also a lot of projects in that year where they're spending money. One of the other things that we need to be mindful of is we can be prudent in maintaining expenses and keeping the budget as same as possible, but if we get less money back in revenue sharing and that kind of stuff from the state, that has nothing to, it's no reflection on what we've done with the budget. So if there's a big shift, you know, say 2 years from now, we don't get the same money from the state that we're getting this year, and the revaluation lands that year, our budget could remain the same 2 years from now as it is now or next year with the, you know, modest increases and still have a big increase. So, I mean, it's important for people to understand that a revaluation isn't the only reason why you may see an increase in your taxes. And I think that that's sometimes what people don't understand.
Very good.
So,
Mr. Fillmore, you want to take the podium for a moment?
Larry Fillmore from Lisbon. I think we're shying away from the main point of this. A reevaluation is an opportunity for the town to get a very good picture of what the property and the town is valued at. And it gives Bill a chance to have correct data on file here, and I think that's wonderful. The problem I have is that we're trying to link this to the budget. And we're trying to link it to our taxes. And it is linked to our taxes only in one way. that we have to pay for what we're spending. Okay? Now, it doesn't make any difference what the evaluation is on our property, because there's a little thing called assessment ratio that says whatever your value is, we need to collect X amount of dollars, and if we have to raise it from 56 to 80% ratio, we'll do that in order to collect our thing. Doesn't make any difference what your evaluation is. We're going to raise it that amount to cover our expenses. So the evaluation is a tool to gather information to get a true value. But it doesn't have anything to do with collecting taxes, because the assessment ratio is what affects the amount of taxes that you've got to increase, right?
I don't understand what you're saying.
What I'm saying is, if the town spent $1 million and the property value is at 80%, and that does not cover the amount of expenditures, they turn around and raise the assessment ratio from 80 to 100% in order to collect the additional taxes necessary to cover the expenses.
No, that's not how it works, Mr. Fillmore. It's actually, it's the tax rate that you're thinking of, not the assessed ratio. That was not why that was done.
Am I right or wrong?
You're totally wrong.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I mean, I think your basic idea, Mr. Fillmore, is correct in that we have, you know, say the town's total value is $400 million, and it's a multiplier of that versus how much we need to raise, which gives us the tax rate that we charge to your individual property.
Right.
Right, and so your basic idea is right, your terminology is just a little off, but we understand that, and we know that it's the total dollar figure that each person has to pay that is what matters in the end, and that's what we're looking at, and we know
the
that.
assessment value is not a factor.
Right, that's just a, you know, one goes up and the other one go down and they balance out. So I think I understand where you're coming from. Any further questions from the public? Dot?
Two things. Dot Fitzgerald, resident of Lisbon Falls. As much as I hate to agree with Ken Wells, the remark he made last week about the valuation went up, the tax rate went down, mill rate went down, and his taxes went up. Mine did too. Got to spend less money. And I agree to respond to what Mike Boy was saying. If it takes 2 to 3 years for a revaluation, unless somebody goes out and does a drastic improvement to their property, I don't anticipate values to change that much within a year or 2 or 3. I don't think that that would make that big of impact. Question, Mr. Van Tynen, you've been working here in this town for some time, and is it all right if I address him?
Certainly.
All right. I'm on the Board of Assessment Review, so I was doing some research on the assessing department last week and the week before, talking with my daughter in Lisbon, and I was telling her how she can get on the Town of Lisbon website, lisbonmaine.org, and then get on the assessing department. And she called me a little while later. Her last name begins with R, and she says, "Ma, how come?" She said, there's a lady, last name begins with R, at the bottom of her page, owns her property, her buildings are valued at $212,300, and she has 4.5 acres of land, and it right here gives you the value of the land, the 1 acre building lot, $45,948. The additional 3.5 acres is valued at $2,888 for a total of 4.5 acres, zero valuation. No taxes on her land. She's not being taxed on 4.5 acres of land. So I started going through the, I don't know how old or how accurate the assessed values are online, I started going through yesterday and I
Okay,
found.
okay, Dot, I know, if you have issues with specific pieces, I think maybe you should come in and make an appointment with Mr. Van Tynen to see when those, if they're not correct. I think what may have happened in some of those old records too is you have the property and the land were put together into one thing and they're just not separated out, so those old records are, well, that's certainly what we're trying to fix here.
No valuation on 3 properties, land valuation.
Oh, yeah, well, that doesn't reflect well in the previous reval.
Doesn't reflect.
No.
You've been here for a while. I don't know what you've been doing, but the revaluation hasn't been, or the values haven't been upgraded.
Right, thank you, Dot.
I guess what I will be checking in relation to that is your situation is that last year, your assessor's office put a lot of information in a computer system using, I think, what I've described a few times as Trio software. That's a very good program. It works very well. And they put the information in wholesale from the old property record cards. Information from 21 years ago was put in without being reviewed, without being looked at again, just wholesale transferred from one record, interpreted a little bit to enter into the computer because the computer has data entry requirements that aren't exactly what's on the old property record card. And information was put in on land and it was put on buildings, on buildings. But it was not utilized in the final analysis to develop your valuation of the town for last year. What was utilized to develop your valuation for the town last year was the previous valuation from 2009 times a factor of 1.32. For the vast majority of properties. It wasn't for every single one, but for the very vast majority of properties. I don't know that this is a fact, but I suspect that some of that information is available on your website as it was entered and never used and never reviewed and never checked. And it isn't the actual assessed valuation. It was what was entered into a computer but not utilized. And I will check that, because if that's the case, it shouldn't be out as being accurate information if it is not accurate information. And I just want to make one other point. I've been assisting you with tax assessments since last fall. I was sworn in as your interim tax assessor sometime last fall or last winter in order to help you get your tax commitment done and out in good working order. I've reported to you a couple of times as a council on where I think your records are, where I think you ought to be heading, what you ought to be doing just to get your regular tax assessment office in shape and running well, and what you ought to be doing long range so that you can say that you have values that are accurate based on good information and are the result of at least something approaching a tax appraisal program or a revaluation. I started with you in the middle of a year, and I've really just been your interim, hold it together tax assessor. Let's get through what we're in. Let's get into the next year. That's what I've been doing. And if your expectations were that I was going to do a whole lot more than that, while you're thinking things through on how to fund the assessment office on an ongoing basis, And whether or not to pursue a revaluation, your expectation was wrong. I've been relatively a caretaker assessor because that's what I thought you needed. I thought that's what you hired for me to do. That's what I've been doing. Any questions?
That's all we asked you to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I think
Thank you,
that's
Bill.
all we expected. I don't think we expect you to fix everything magically overnight. All right. Next item, Twyla?
Is the town manager's report.
Just a couple of things. We heard this morning from the town of Durham. We had put out a proposal for them at their request to do animal control. Last night, the Board of Selectmen approved that. We are drawing up contracts, and we'll move forward with that. We'll be picking it up immediately and then into the new year. So that makes our four towns that we are doing that for, which will help offset the cost for all of us. Also, the fire department has been offered a garage that sits across the street from the T. Smith Hose Company. It's part of the Lisbon Emergency Building that was just recently purchased. We've been offered that building for free. We just have to move it across the street and put it on a foundation. Something we didn't plan on, but the cost is pretty reasonable for that building. It's a two-car garage, Sean. The cost is approximately $5,700. I just need authority to move forward on that if we can find the funding. I don't know if I have to look at the budget and look and see if I can find that somewhere, but it'll allow us to create more space in our existing station, both our stations to store antique equipment. That's up to you, I guess.
So, could I ask a question? The cost to move this two-car garage and put it on a foundation, so the cost of the foundation?
Well, it's a
include-
floating slab. It'll be the cost of moving it across the street, preparing the ground for concrete to be poured, and then moving the building across the street and fastening it down on this slab.
Where would we be putting that? On the lot?
There's a couple of different places. It would probably cost us less money if we put it across the street or to the right of the station on that property there that we acquired, or we could put it on the parking lot next to the building, next to the fire station.
Are we getting bids on all this work?
We haven't got a bid. This price came from a gentleman who's doing the work, a local contractor who's doing the work for LES. That's actually either tearing down that section and putting up a new three-bay garage.
I think it would be important. I think it's a great opportunity to be able to take advantage of it, but it'd be nice to actually have a more laid-out, definite plan where the location would be and exactly what would take place. I mean, I think that'd be, I think necessary to make a final determination on it myself, but I'm not sure what the rest of the council feels, but.
I agree with Fern that I'd need to know more information before I said yes to that.
Is there a timeline, Steve, whether the garage is gonna be moved or not moved, or?
Yes.
The emergency's waiting on the decision.
So, can I just,
Yes.
this all transpired in the last 6 days then? Because the letter that we have from Lisbon Emergency was that they were raising the two-bay garage.
Yes, this is within the last week.
Is the possibility, Sean, of having it moved over to the parking lot and just blocked up for now? Is that a possibility until we make final? I mean, if it's idea of just moving it is a big factor, I mean, is that even an option? That would give us a little more time to better plan?
Any option is what you want to go with. It's just that you either do all the work up front or you move it to one location and then figure out where we're going to put it and move it to another location, or, you know, that type of thing. If you want to do it all at once and get it done, or if you want to move it, get out of the way, and then let them.
I would just hate to think that we lose the opportunity because of timing, if we could just move it over and set it on blocks or something in the parking lot for now until we get ready, because, I mean, anything that we do, I mean, just pouring cement and setting things up and making proper entry and figuring for electrical, I mean, all that, I mean, to me would be something you'd want to have well planned out before you just.
Where do we store the vehicles now?
Inside
Inside.
both companies.
Yeah, they're in the back.
They're piled in the E.T. Smith Hose Company, in the back, against the back wall where, you know, we move equipment and do everything else around them too. So getting them out of the station into their own dedicated area would be a definite, it saves the wear and tear or bumping up against them or everything else. Along with some of the other miscellaneous equipment that's taking up room that we don't necessarily, it may be seasonal or it may be, you know, not used at certain times of the year, so.
No, I told Steve today that, when he told me, I think that's very cheap money to do that. I really do.
It's very cheap.
Very cheap.
FCI is the one that was doing it, and that, they got the quote. The only reason I asked them to work a bit up for us is because they're the ones that are actually building the garage, Lisbon Emergency is going with, to build their 3-bay garage on that building in place of the 2-bay garage that they're actually getting rid of.
I would have a hard time to do that myself with no labor involved, just buying materials.
Yeah, I'm not hung up on the price, I'm more concerned about the location. I don't know if we want to put it on that property we just acquired.
I would not be in favor of that myself. But go ahead, Mike. Mike, could you step up to the podium, Mike?
Things have a tendency to burn down on that property.
Lisbon Emergency has already obtained their building permits to raise that a couple of weeks ago, so I talked to Jeremy about it, and he was telling me he was going forward with it, so this is a time issue here, so, you know, they've already gotten their permits to do their work there.
So they've got a permit to build a new garage at this point?
Yes, sir, I even have the blueprints and everything for the
Yeah.
brand-new garage.
Yeah, good. Yeah. I would think that'd be the way they'd want to go instead of trying to raise that small one. I mean, but
So, I mean, is it viable to actually move it over to the parking lot? Sean, do you know that? You know, without necessarily putting it on a slab yet?
It'll all depend on how it's gonna hold together. They're gonna shore it up as best they can.
Right.
They're gonna drag it at that point. At that point, we have to go around the corner and up the street, as opposed to just going right across the street. So if it makes it, it makes it. If it doesn't, then, right? It's a pretty,
Bonfire
you
in
know.
the street.
Yeah.
just a 2x4 construction garage, or so
Correct.
it's basically just a shelf?
They're gonna skid it out, you know, put skids underneath it, and I think they were talking about, Mr. Bulick was gonna hook onto it with a loader and let her rip.
Give her a tug.
Yeah. See if we have splinters left, or if we actually have a garage left, so.
Guess we'll take our chances.
It was an opportunity,
Yeah.
and that's, you know, so.
How does
think we
council
oughta
feel?
Get it across the road anyway, hadn't we?
Yeah.
And then have a bonfire. That's what-
Bonfire. I think the biggest thing is just making sure we have proper planning for location, because, I mean, it would,
Well, you have two
Yeah.
choices. Okay, you have the parking lot next to the fire station, or you have the lot directly across the street, which is the easiest move.
Is that municipal parking?
Yes. Is it municipal parking? Yes.
I was gonna say, does it meet all the ordinances?
How much is it used?
There's four or five cars there typically daily.
That we would
It would
displace?
have no effect, the garage would have no effect on the parking, as far as the municipal.
Doesn't impact firefighters?
No, we're looking at putting it up in the back corner. So typically, like the BIW group, all parks adjacent to the property that we just acquired along there, to be completely out of our way for any response, because they park more towards the station in the front row,
So you're gonna put it in the upper corner?
in the upper. At that point, we'll probably move the fire prevention trailer next to it, so everything's right there, and then you're gonna actually gain what we have for the fire prevention trailer, because that's, we keep right out in the open, so that at night, when the police are doing their drive-bys, they can see if anybody's around it or anything.
the other question would be is if you are setting it on tar, do you actually need to put a cement pad, or could you actually shore it up on the tar and use the tar as a base?
I had asked about doing that, and maybe just putting on pressure-treated plates, you know, putting that underneath it, and just letting the tar sit on there. The weather is what the condition would be there. It would actually, I was told that it would only last a couple years. You're gonna end up rotting above the pressure-treated, and the walls are gonna start to rot out and everything else without it being on a proper
would the slab actually be above the level of the tower? I guess I'd have to see the.
Slab, when they did that, if they cut the tar out of there, they would actually make sure that, you know, they reinforce what's underneath there so that we have a floating slab that is, because that parking lot itself isn't the
Tower does
straightest
move,
part.
I mean.
Right.
And all that's part of the estimate,
To move it across the street.
and put in the slab.
Correct.
But not to the parking lot.
Not to the parking lot. I don't imagine it would be that much more to tow it around the corner.
And height-wise and stuff, there's no question about electrical.
Height-wise wire looks, everything looks, it's short enough that it should clear everything that's there.
What's the dimensions?
24 by 24.
Your basic 2x4, two-door,
Thick built.
slow
Right.
level.
Yeah, that's my preference for now, would be take it up to the parking lot and put it there, and then we can get a real plan and come back and vote on that. I hate to vote on something that's, seems kind of undefined.
It's like a gamble.
Do I hear a motion? Do we need a motion to go forward with this?
Wait, we're still gonna be expending some cost just to have them move it,
Have them
right?
move it, yeah.
It's a
Right.
$2,000 cost. just to
$2,000
move it.
cost, okay. So, I mean, we can just let them tear it down and pass the opportunity up if that's what people want to do.
No, I don't think we ought to pass it
What do
up.
you think, Roger?
Yeah.
No, I don't think we ought to pass it up. That's,
Yeah.
that's a good buy.
Hmm.
I really don't.
Who's doing the concrete?
CI, they're doing everything. Buick was doing the site work. It's who he had come in now. I mean, we can, you know, definitely.
Hence, that's why his tractor's there to drag it across the street, right?
Put it in that upper corner, I guess I'm okay with it.
I'd be in favor of the idea of,
I'm sorry, I'm unclear. The upper corner of what? The parking lot?
Of the parking lot.
Yeah, the far side from the fire station, but the
Right.
parking lot, you know, that's next
And
to
didn't
it.
you just say that that changes the flow of traffic there? Instead of going straight in, it changes the way if you put it in the upper part of the parking lot?
If we go, we have to go up around the corner with the garage if we go into the parking lot.
How he has to transport the garage to get there.
Oh,
Right,
oh, oh,
right.
okay.
Doesn't
I thought he was
affect,
talking
doesn't
about-
change flow of traffic on the road, yeah.
Okay, no, I thought he meant like trucks coming in and out.
that'll go on the Franklin Street entrance, right?
And would you be satisfied with that? Do you think it would meet the need?
Yeah, it'll definitely meet the need. I mean, we'll be able to get the stuff out of, electrically, we're gonna have that poses a little bit of a problem because there is a pole just outside the station for the property next door that we'd be able to use. But, we'll do what we need to do to try to get, you know, either a space heater in there for the winter time to maintain or whatever we need to do. We don't need to have electrical in it.
Okay, in doing this,
Cold storage.
are we going to meet all of the zoning around there if we move it to this upper part of the parking lot and make it a permanent fixture there? Are we meeting all
I-
the setback
I can meet with, yeah,
for the boundary lines and?
I'll make sure that we meet the setbacks as far as where the parking lot sits and everything else and see what we're at, yeah.
Why don't you just put it on that property you acquired? Why put it somewhere where you don't really wanna put it? Put it, where you got that property now, put it there, get it done.
It's an option if we want to do that. I mean,
Well, that's the only reason I had asked about the idea of
What do
just
you
really
want?
checking the options and seeing what the property and where it would be located on.
Is that property
I
rented?
prefer not to put it on that because of all the controversy around that lot
Yeah.
there. I prefer to not have that and just auction it off,
By,
you know.
in the site work?
You're gonna have to do a slab.
That property can't really be auctioned, it's not big enough for anything to be auctioned off for, except for a empty lot.
You can auction anything.
I would say, as far as, not to lose the deal, I would think the idea of moving it just to get it to a location where we actually have control over it and it's out of their way, and then maybe come back with just a plan for either or. Just without knowing the information of, exactly what that lot is and what our intended use is, and, because I don't think we've ever moved forward with the idea of deciding what that lot was gonna be used
I
for.
don't think you wanna move it too many times.
No,
But,
you don't.
no.
It's gonna cost
You
you.
got, I think you got a one-shot deal
Right.
to move it. And you just gotta decide whether or not you wanna put it on the upper end, or do you wanna put it on that existing lot?
And the
I
price is
don't
for
think
the
that lot
existing
can be
lot.
sold for
And
anything.
the price is what?
The price is on the existing lot, and that's with putting like a foot of crushed rock in there to build that up, so that they can build that,
On the property we acquired?
correct.
And what would you be using for, and again, the things I'm thinking in my head, is there any driveways gonna be necessary to be able to enter that, or are you gonna be putting it right on the edge?
Oh, there's already a sloped area to be able to get in there already. So there's no building up of the property in order to make the garage accessible. It's built for the foundation. It comes up to where the sidewalk level is and where the existing driveway used to be for the property, and it would,
So you've looked this all over and thought it out pretty well and talked it over with everybody.
correct. We walked the property with FCI and Jeremy and went
Yeah.
through everything and what our options were, because my option was the back parking lot. I was gonna touch,
Yeah.
right, the other area. And he goes, really, the best place to put it, it's right there. I mean, you move it once and it's
Done.
done, right?
And it's visible.
Is that doable, Steve?
I think so. But I have to look at the budget first, make sure I have the funding.
Yeah, no, I know it's all based on whether you got the money, but you need
I just need your authorization to okay.
our
You don't want
authorization
any
to go ahead and do
surprises.
it, right?
Make sure everything's clear and.
I'm not sure if you want to take a vote. I mean, I would have no problem. To me, the property, the idea that I was holding back wasn't the idea that I didn't think it was actually a just project. It would be just the idea, make sure that everything's in place for us to do it to make it the best, you know what I mean?
Right.
And not look back a month from now saying, why did we do this, you know?
Right.
If that property is suitable and it works with Mike to make sure that it's all gonna be, we're not gonna have someone knocking on the door, you know, a month later saying, why do we do this? Because this doesn't fit the criteria. I mean, that would be my, I just don't wanna shoot from the hip to make sure, just
Right.
to save, you know, a few $1,000s, you know, but.
Doesn't that property have to be auctioned off?
You own it,
It
you can do
doesn't,
it
it
as
doesn't
you
have to be,
please.
but I would, but.
The only person you're really gonna have any interest with would be the abutter on that side. And they actually had expressed an interest in that. And we contacted them once all that was taken care of, and we have not heard from them, so I'm not sure if they're still interested or not.
Do I hear any?
I guess I'll make a motion to go forward and take advantage of moving this garage and.
I'll second it, how's that?
All right, any further discussion?
I would.
What is this motion?
To-
Moving it to
to
the
which-
existing?
Moving it to the vacant property.
Okay. And you seconded that, Roger, is that correct? Okay. Any further discussion from council? Anything from the public?
All I just wanna say is,
Could you come use the podium so people at home can hear you?
David Judd from Lisbon Falls. All I have to say is, just have it set back far enough for plowing. That's all I care about. Because we finally got a good lot to put the snow. But if it's set back right, you can put the snow to one side and clean those areas as well.
You want to snow blow the whole thing, you mean? Yeah.
No, use plow.
All right, Dot, hold on, Dot, I wanted to make a comment.
Well, we're doing budget negotiations, and the cost was $5,700 for a new foundation and to move it. Is that inclusive?
Yes.
Okay, maybe the fire department, if they really want it, can fine-tune their budget a little bit and come up with that $5,700 in their present budget.
All right, thank you. You had a comment?
Just going along with the thought of monies is with the capital plan we have in place with the fire department that we do is that money earmarked for any capital improvement, or does that actually have to be something that was laid out previously for, I mean, is there a limit on, is it a possibility to use the funds out of that capital improvement?
Which account is that?
As far as the yearly,
That's only for.
that's truck replacement, okay, truck replacement.
That's really earmarked for that, and that's the
Okay.
way it's been approved. You should really stay within those guidelines.
I have no problem with that, just I had to ask it, so.
Okay. Anything further? All right, I guess we'll take a vote. All those in favor? And opposed? Motion passes?
Yes, 5-2. Motion passes. Carried.
If you could, Steve, it would be nice as soon as you do figure out the layout or some information, just to maybe forward it on to councilors, just so we could
I'll do that.
have an idea.
All right, next item, Twyla?
Under E, bond referendum discussion.
Tonight is, if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me, if the council wants to put a bond question on the ballot in June, this would be the night to say, to do that. But if you're not prepared to do that,
I
then
have no desire to put one on in June.
No. Are we really ready? Do we have anything ready to go?
We're not ready.
well, if you fund it, yeah, we could do things this summer if you chose to fund it, but if not, then we'll have to wait.
So what you're saying is what we've been talking about, the workshops, that amount of money earmarked for the roof and the windows and the Fisher Road, and we would have to formulate the language and agree upon that tonight in order for?
No, you would just say that you want to move forward with those questions based on our discussions that we've had, and then you will come back, I'll come back to you with a formal ballot question that you would have to approve along with a warrant. What we're proposing is if you choose to do it this way, it would just be, we will fund the reval through the operating budget, like we had discussions of, and then ask the public to fund the borrowing of about $550,000 roughly.
I don't think we're prepared to do that. That's my opinion.
No.
I don't think we're prepared to do that right now.
The other option would be to actually, to work on it and have it go for the November vote, right?
Right.
That would be the other option.
That would be the other option. Then you're putting off another whole year of repairing the roof and everything.
The thing about it is, Steve, is you put that out there with the economy the way it is right now, they're gonna throw that at you, so you're wasting your time. The people are not gonna vote to spend another bunch of money.
You'll have better turnout in November, so.
Yeah.
I'll probably increase the chances of
I
passing
mean,
that.
you're gonna have the expense of the election, the process, and the people are gonna toss it down because everybody's hurting. I don't see how that we could ever get a bond passed right now.
But there already is an election, I mean, they're already having voting, that's,
You're already going to have a vote in June on the school on the school question, so you just have to make the ballot for those bond items and individually, like we had talked about at one of our meetings.
I guess my concern, one of them is that the Fisher Road Bridge
Fisher Bridge Road.
repair, how are we gonna do that if we don't put it out to a bond?
I personally think we have leftover money in an existing bond that we had done a year or so ago that was for construction projects that we can rebuild that bridge with the remaining funds from there. We may not be able to pave the whole road and make it look pretty,
Yeah.
but you can fix the bridge.
That was the discussion that we were having a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's my personal opinion and what I think we have left over based on what's in that bond.
Do you agree with that, Steve? Do you think that there's money in the
Oh,
account there?
we think there's enough money to do the bridge.
Just
But
can't
that's
repave
about
it,
it.
can't do ditching
You
and
won't be
other
able to
stuff
do
that
any
you'd want to
ditching, you
do.
won't be able to do any paving or reclaiming of the existing road.
I mean, the real safety issue is the bridge.
Safety, my recommendation is if we didn't fund that bridge repair was, we would, between Ryan and Buttons, we were gonna close off that bridge because of the safety issues, so.
See, the issue that I have with this whole bond thing, Steve, is we've done this in the past with our public works garage. When we bonded, bring these bonds to the public, we clutter them with things that are not particularly positive with a lot of people. There are a lot of citizens in town that are not very happy about the MTM Center to begin with, and putting windows and a roof on that building is the last thing they want to do. They'd rather see it leak and get torn down. And then you have other people that have their heart in that building. And we're tying this to our reevaluation. So what we're doing is we're shooting our reevaluation in the foot by attaching something else to it.
My recommendation is not to fund the revaluation through a bond, it's to fund it through the operating budget.
No, but we did speak of this.
Yes, we did.
That's why we've talked about breaking it up into sections, because
So-
giving people the choice of what they want to vote for.
So let's go back to the roof on the MTM Center then, that's been leaking a lot, there's a lot of damage that's happening. We already heard in Jessica's report that there was, some increased expenses because we continue to have this leaking problem. How are we gonna fund doing that? I mean, I think it is a necessary repair. And one of the things that I've heard for several years is that we don't take care of our buildings, so we end up spending more money.
Or doing
How
that.
are we gonna end up getting that money to do that roof repair. And so
And-
we
and
stop,
I-
you know, throwing money here, there, and everywhere.
I agree with you, Laura. With that building, if we're gonna keep the building, we should repair it.
I
We
think
should
it's
do it, but
proven
the
to be
problem
pretty
is,
successful.
is that the next thing is to sell it to the public, and the public in the past has not been in favor of keeping these old school buildings. They've wanted to get rid of them since they closed them.
I think
Steve.
that,
Go ahead.
sorry. I think that at one point was the mindset, but as evidenced by the Marion T. Morse Center, the MTM Center being full to capacity and actually needing more space down there, people's mindset, I think, has changed. I mean, they're utilizing that building, and people are very happy with that building. And it is generating a huge revenue source for us.
Put it out to Paul.
Steve, if we do a bond in November, and I think we've done this before, there's a way to go use your existing money.
There's a bond anticipation, though, you can do, yes.
Right, so we could go use money that we have, right? We could take it out of undesignated or whatever and slate it and,
Or borrow, yeah.
right, and then, or borrow, and then when we got the bond money
Reimburse.
in spring,
That's right.
reimburse that. So you could potentially get a bond passed in the early November and get the roof fixed in November.
Yeah, if the public approves, if whatever specific projects they want to do, okay, and we go out and that gets approved, say the Public Works Garage addition doesn't pass, they say, we don't want to fund that, but we do want to fund the roof, the windows, and the bridge, and the work to the E.T. Smith, the electrical and the siding. And that, say that adds up to $400,000, and the public says, these are the projects we want you to do, nothing else. $400,000 in November or in September, we submit our application to the bond bank, and we're not really concerned, we'll get approved, but in the anticipation of that approval, we could borrow the funding because we have approval from the townspeople to go ahead and borrow this and do the work this.
After they vote.
After they vote in June, yes. And if they say no, then we just continue to dump money into the building to fix the roof and.
Right. I mean, I'm just trying to, if people aren't comfortable knowing what they want to do and decide tonight, I'm just trying to point out that I think there's another option of waiting till November and still being able to fix some of the urgent stuff that's there.
The cost to your budget this year, I think, is just under $10,000 for the upcoming year.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta be careful with that because you're only paying the interest.
Yeah, but even the
10,000, the
coming
next
year-
year it's 100,000.
No, it's not,
Or
it's
some number.
68, roughly, but it's up to you. I wanted to present that to you because tonight's the cutoff. If you want us to draft up the language to put it on the June ballot, then this is the night we have to say, let's do that.
I do want to say one thing if I can. Since I've been the one out there having petitions signed and asking some questions, I'm finding out that a lot of the elderly people, and there's a lot of people really like the MTM Center right now. They really do. They use it. And they'd like to see at least the roof fixed. So, and right now, I'm the one that's going out and seeing the people.
One of the things that the MTM committee and I and Ryan have talked about is if you choose to do this, what we had planned to do is put together a brochure talking points on all the questions that will be on the bond, and making sure we emphasize that the MTM committee's main objective is in top priority is getting the roof done. And I've drafted that somewhat, and if we move forward, I'll make sure everybody gets a copy of that before we put it in the mail for everybody. But we do a mass mailing like we've done in the past, so people have a real good explanation of what this funding mechanism is for and why.
Is there a way, Steve, to bond this out without, and separate them? The repairs of the MTM?
Oh, yeah, that's what we had talked about,
You
is
know.
each question, having a check point for MTM roof, MTM windows, Fisher Road Bridge, and Public Works, and E.T. Smith.
Because it's too bad to drag down one particular project with the overload of the other.
We can set it up so, and that's one of the things we talked about at the Budget committee meeting last
Right.
time, was we would do it, the recommendations of everybody was that we would do a separate for each one, and let the public decide what they want to fund.
And at this time, the MTM roof is a necessity more than a want. It's a need more than a
We're
want.
pouring, I mean, if you had been in the building in the last several months and saw the damage that was done in one room where the Head Start was, Head Start had to move out. That whole area, the ceilings are all collapsed, and the quantity of water was astronomical. And we keep repairing it, and then it just continues to leak in other areas. The water just goes to where it least resistance.
What I was gonna say was, Steve, is that the MTM roof is a need. The Fisher Bridge is a need.
Yes, it is.
The windows are not necessarily a need, but it would be a very nice thing to do to the MTM.
So you're
So,
heating the outdoors with the water.
well, granted, but I mean, it's not something that's gonna deteriorate the building over waiting another year to do it. The siding on the ET hose company, it'd be nice, but it's something we can get away with for another year or so.
Right, the
I'm not
electrical
so
is
sure
really
about
bad,
that.
it's a problem.
We've
Well-
put that off, you've put that off for how many years, Sean?
5.
5 years, and it just continues to get worse. And plus you have wiring issues that need to be resolved there as
The
well.
wiring issues is what I really
Yeah.
noticed. Really
So-
noticed
Be
it.
a real difficult.
We've talked about the concern that people aren't going to accept the bond the way it is, but I think that if we break it down where they have an option of picking the priorities to them, then we're doing exactly what people have been asking us to do, and that's to leave it to the voters. I mean, if we put it out there to
Right.
say, you know, the Marion T. Morris, the Fisher Road, the, you know, all the different projects, and let them vote on it, we're doing what they've asked, to let them vote on it. If they vote each one of those in, or they vote one of them down, then we know exactly
So-
where we stand.
Right, so the real question is, do we want to do it in June, or do we want to do it in November?
Well, this is Lori's opinion. If we don't do it in June, and we wait until November, you provided another option of how we could do some of that stuff during the summertime, because I believe that there are projects that we should have the money available for and should work on during the summer. Roof, the Fisher Road
I
Bridge.
didn't say we do it in the summertime, you can't do it until the bond's approved.
So you'd be doing
You
it
can just
after.
go immediately borrow the money, we wouldn't get the money from the bond bank until the spring.
Till,
Right, but all I'm saying is there's enough time left in November to go fix the roof, once the voters vote on it. I don't want to make anybody think that I
Yeah,
said we
no,
could don't do the
I guess I
money.
would like to have the option of being able to put it out to the vote, so that if some of the work could be done in the summertime, that some of those,
If we're gonna, in my opinion, is if we're gonna
Projects.
agree the idea, put it out there, just put it out in June and see they're gonna make a break. And then, I mean, the idea of Fisher Road, I mean, we do have funds that potentially could be used for it, but that's not really what the funds are intended to be used for.
But what if we're not
Yeah.
gonna, what if we don't need to use, right, I mean, again, what if we don't need to use the money for Fisher Road? Right, if we've got money left over in a bond that we can use, and we've got a more critical thing, why do we wanna go bond more money to go do something?
But I think, wasn't I told once, if we don't, even though we get the bond, doesn't mean we actually have to take all the funding from that bond? I mean, is that a, I mean, that's the only statement that's going back in the past, yeah.
Right, I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have to go do it, but then why did you go ask the people for it? Right? I mean, if we know we have money now that we can go use to go do some of this stuff, why do we really need to go ask them for that money?
Which it would only be the Fisher Road, it would
Why
be,
don't we put it out? I'd kinda go with you. I'd go with November. And fix the Fisher Road, then ask what we gotta have, put it in.
Trouble is you're delaying the roof on the MTM.
I know it, and I don't like it, but with more people voting.
You're the one that just said the people wanted it done.
Yeah, and they do. But I wanna have more people voting for it too.
yeah.
Dr. Morton, he's on the MTM board.
John, do you have a comment? Come to the podium.
John Weirsbiggy, resident of Lisbon. Fairly simple thing. The thing that's the most important seems to be the roof of the MTM building. Just put a request for bond on the June ballot for that, and the rest of it due November. It's a smaller bond, one item. That might be a lot more palatable to people than seeing multiple ones. Possible easy solution.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I don't know how the council feels.
Can you go for a bond for that amount of money?
That's too small. I think it has to be 500,000 or more. So, well, it doesn't, because the school bonded 350,000, so.
Yeah. Gordon, you have a comment you'd like to make?
Yeah, one or two.
Sure.
Gordon Curtis, Lisbon Falls. I'm on the MTM Board of Directors, have been since we started that in '04. And by the way, it's not Marion T. Morse, it's MTM Center.
I corrected myself.
I would urge you to go to vote on the referendum in June. That roof is bad. It's deteriorated bad over the last 2 or 3 or 4 years. And you don't just have a bad roof with water leaking through it. You've got mold problems, rotten wood, rotten decking, all that kind of stuff. You leave your roof on your house wide open? Heck no. Nobody does. It's just a fix that needs to be done. Needs to be done now. Should have been done 3 or 4 years ago, perhaps. When we first took over that building, I thought that we could get by with that roof for a few years, but it hasn't turned out that way. We've lost the Head Start people because of the roof leaking in that area and mold on the floor. There's other places where it leaks, some in some closets and stuff. If you didn't want to put the windows on that bond, we the committee didn't have a problem with that, but we voted unanimously to do something with that roof. That's why I'd like to see it voted in June and put those items out there one by one, and if the people don't want it, they don't want it. But Roger, I'm surprised. You say you hear a lot of people that don't like that place. How many people?
Well, what I was
Is it 5 people or 10 people or what? There's 500 people down there that use that all the time, and they like it. And you hear good things about it in town all over the place.
What I was bringing out, Gordon, was the fact that there was a lot of people that felt when the new community school was built, the Marion T. Moss School should have been torn down, the LES should have been torn down and got rid of the tax burden. And you still have that frame of mind in some of the people out there. Whether the way that the building is being used today for the MTM, absolutely, it's got a very large following, and I agree with it highly. But the thing that I'm getting at is that if we're going to put this out to bond, I think that we, in this economy, we are asking to have our bond shot down if we burden it with too much other stuff. I think if you need a roof, we should ask for a roof, period. I don't think that we should go for windows and we should go for other things that we want in town. We should try to get the roof put on that building to preserve the building. And that's the point that I was bringing out.
Okay, and like I said, I have no problem with not having the windows on there. But we just need that roof real bad. And if people vote for it, okay, and if they don't, well, we'll have to find some other way to do it. But
I personally, Gordon, would support putting that out to bond to get that roof fixed, and we need that bridge done on Fisher Road. As far as the items on the table tonight, I think those are the two things that are needs and not wants.
I'd hate to see you wait till November and try to get the roof done in November. That's when all those big roofing companies are scurrying to get those projects done, just like the paving runs out about that time of year. A lot of them want to get it wrapped up before winter time. So I'd like to see it go out in June, and then we'll know, what the people think.
Steve, can we ask you to come up with the bond proposals, and then we can always decide next week or 2 weeks at our next meeting if we want to go forward with them? Is that a possibility?
What's the timing?
Want to draft some questions?
And we can see if we want to go forward with it or not. I mean, that would be an option. We'd have some actual language there.
So what's the deadline for tonight then?
Is to get the draft up and
You need, I think it's 45 days in advance of the date, so we'll let you know once we draft them.
So 45 days from June 10th? Is that the day?
Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon.
I have a question.
It's Tuesday, if you have a
Next
special
Tuesday.
meeting.
Tuesday.
Yeah, that's why it's on
Yeah.
this
5
tonight's
days.
question.
We just don't have anything drafted. I don't know how we can vote on something that's not in drafted form.
Well, all you're voting is to authorize us to draft the language so we can create a warrant and create a document for the public to vote on. That's right.
Yeah, you can hold a meeting next Tuesday to approve a warrant with the draft articles, once you review them, if you want.
Don't we have to have a warrant for the school to go on the ballot as well?
The school's a different time frame.
Steve, do we know what the minimum amount is that we can put out the bond? I mean, is that?
I don't know that question. Do you know,
Yeah.
Jess? What did I answer?
Dot, do you have a question?
Yeah, Dorothy Fitzgerald again. You need to put things in perspective. You were just discussing $5,700 to move a garage from one location to another, and you were gonna find some way to come up with the money. How much is the roof for the MTM Center? What's the estimate for that?
$135,000.
It's a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
$115,000, and the window's $135,000.
It depends on what you know. Ryan got more accurate numbers recently. 135 was the amount, wasn't it, Jess?
135? Yeah, and you'd build into the budget $10,000 raise for one employee.
No, we're not discussing that right now.
I know it, but, you know, things need to be put into perspective. Yeah, if the roof needs to be done, the building is gonna deteriorate, as Gordon Curtis says, you're gonna have more mold. If it's fixed, then you're gonna be able to utilize the rooms that are vacant now, which is going to improve the income. I'm assuming that this has gone out to bid for the roofing?
Not until I have the funding to do it.
After we get the money is usually when we put the bids out.
Yes.
Okay, but estimates, have you had estimates?
Yes, those are the estimates.
How many?
What they were.
1, 2?
Ryan has taken care of the estimates. It's been from several different companies. We've done it in the past. 3 years ago, we had prices done, and we've gone back and had other prices recently.
Okay, so you've had estimates.
Yes, we have.
Thank you, Dot. Would you like to take the podium and give your question or comment?
Miriam Morgan Alexander, Lisbon. Mostly it's a comment. Councilor Cody comes up with needs and wants. Very well. The two needs. Time is your enemy. You need to deal with this as soon as possible. The more lead time you have, the more time you can plan it properly and get it done. That's it.
Okay, so do I have any proposals from council? What are we feeling like we want to do here?
I think we ought to put it out in June for the MTM roof and the Fisher Bridge. If we feel we can find the money for the Fisher Bridge in an existing account, then I think we ought to limit it to just the roof on the MTM, spending at a minimum. Because people are gonna shoot it down, and then we're gonna be back to ground zero again. And we need to fix it if we're gonna keep that building.
How does anyone else feel?
I wouldn't have a problem with putting the roof by it as a standalone. Just the only question would be is if it's a doable bond. I mean, if it's not.
You're putting a horse before the carriage.
Yeah, that's the thing.
To me, it seems, and again, I don't know where council stands on all this, right? And I think this is part of the reason why we're having trouble coming to a decision, right now, is that if you're gonna put it out there, and we all agree to put it out there, you ought to put everything, right? Put it all out there, because what's the sense in going, you go for the roof in June, and then you go hit them up again in November with the rest of the stuff based on how we come through our budget negotiations. Problem is, we haven't come through our budget negotiations enough to determine what exactly the council wants to do with a bond, right? That's why we're all having trouble sitting here, right? We all know we need to go do things, but it's, how do we want to structure that? So, with lack of knowing nothing, just put it all out there and let the people vote on whatever they want.
I agree. I'll second that.
Let them go for June and be done with it. I mean, it's not exactly what I want to do, but I can't see putting a bond out there for one thing.
Yep.
Put it all out there, let them all show up.
They can, excuse me, Mike,
Yes.
you can structure the question so they can pick and choose
Yep,
which
they
they
can
want.
pick which project.
Vote yes or no on either one of those.
I guess we ought to put it out for June then.
Hey, let the people decide. I agree with that. Yep.
Yep.
Yep, the people that want to spend the money, they don't have to vote for anything.
The only downside to the June is the turnout.
Yeah.
There's the number of people you can get. Excuse me.
Maybe we'll get more turnout, we get the
Maybe.
bond.
It just seems like on all these things that we come up against the wall with, that we always look like that we have had no foresight. We always look like we're always scurrying to get something done because it's a necessity, and not that it isn't a necessity. I saw it, I saw the damage, I see what's down there. But I just feel like we're always up against something, a time constraint, and hurry, gotta get it done. And at the same time, yes, I do agree. It gives the people the opportunity to vote on it, and yes or no. So, there we sit.
So we need a vote on this, or we just?
So I'll make a motion to go forward with the bond with all items except revaluation.
Yep, you voted on it
I'll
separately.
second that, Mike.
Okay, all those in favor? And opposed?
Order passed, 7-0.
Were you opposed or in favor, Mike?
I was half. I was
You
not
have to
on
pick
the
one or
favor.
the other.
Kind of was that way too, kind of like,
Is that a yes or no?
We'll draft some. Can you actually make a motion to vote against your own
yeah,
motion?
they want to vote on budget
You know,
items?
you know what the
Gotta get
sad
something
thing
done
is?
here.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly my point.
Not a whole lot for
All
it.
right,
The whole
next
thing
item,
is,
Twyla?
though, Mike,
Is under audience
I think
participation.
you
All right.
said it.
Now, if anyone
At this
from,
time,
go ahead.
At this time, those in the audience who wish to address the council may come forward. Please use the microphone at the podium and state your name and address for the audience here and at home.
All right, sir, if you'd like to use the podium.
My name is Richard Nettle. I've been a lifetime resident of town Lisbon Falls, Lisbon actually. I got three things. Number one, I think that we should have something up here, especially with the gas going up, where you can bring your bicycle rather if you don't want to use your automobile. Mine is by choice, but bring your bicycle so you can have a place, maybe some things with a little ring on the end of it, that you can put a lock or something on your bike and lock it up there somewhere near the entrance of the town hall. A lot of town halls have these things, but I mean, they're more elaborate. I'm not talking something real elaborate. The other thing is, I brought this up once before, and I believe that this on bicycle safety for the children in our schools should be done during the time that these kids are in school, not in the summertime. That's harder to find them then. I mean, you got a lot of bicycles over here that the police department has that they're going to auction them off. Use some of them bikes to teach the kids bicycle safety, plus the ABCs of their bicycles before they take off, and use them. And another one I'd like to do, bring up, and I'll even serve on it, is to have some kind of a council, a committee, I should say, where you have 3 people in it. Probably one from the council over here, one from the police department, and someone that's either a pedestrian or a bicyclist, where you get together and discuss the roads, like for safety, riding bicycles. I noticed down here when we put this other turn, so you can go up Route 9, there's a part on there that's very, very small now, and it's kind of a hazard, because if you get any sand or salt in there, like right now, of course it's a bigger problem, you're right out there, right in the traffic. Now, I understand bicycle safety pretty well, and the hazards pretty well, because I ride all these roads, or I walk these roads in town. And I think we need to make them safer. And when we talk about improving like 196, like you've talked about, then we ought to be able to have a committee that looks at this stuff on the side of bicyclists and pedestrians, because MDOT only cares how fast I can get an automobile from point A to point B, and they don't care about anything else. And we need this kind of input. I know they have audience, they get people from the audience to give their inputs, but you need to have that input from people who are out there on the sidewalks, either walking or riding bicycles in town. There's going to be more of it because the price of gasoline's going up. And I would eventually, I'm going to, I hope, to start a bicycle club in this town like we have in Brunswick and other places. I'm not quite sure what year, but I think that if we had a committee over here, and like I say, I'll serve on it. And I also would like to thank town for this kid from the school department being on the board. You know, I don't have any voting things. I think it's about time they did that, and I think it's time, if they don't have it, that they have a kid from either high school on the school committee doing the same thing if they don't have it. I think it should be good. Auburn started this a long time ago, and I think it's a good idea. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Neto. We'll definitely look into that. I think it might also be a good idea to work with like the Trails Commission on that, since I know they've built some trails that are usable by bicycles. All right, Mr. Fillmore?
I have two items. Larry Fillmore from Lisbon. I have two items. I'd like for somebody to explain to me why we're paying $69,000 plus for a town engineer who is not qualified for the position. He's a mechanical engineer, and as I understand it, the town requires a civil engineer. So we're paying this guy top dollar, and he's not qualified. How is that possible that it got by this council that we hired someone who is not qualified in the job, and we're paying him $69,000? Somebody want to address that, please?
I believe before you said we don't have to answer you that night.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, before I went on.
I will say he's worked here for a long time, and I think he's certainly qualified. I mean, engineering, a lot of it is, there's specialties. An engineer and trained in one area can certainly learn another, and he's been here for, I don't know exactly how long, 10 years or more. And I think he's certainly proved that he knows what he's doing, and he's very qualified for the job in terms of actual skills on the job.
He's not a licensed civil engineer, which is required by the state. Is it not?
But we will look into that.
Okay. Second thing is, for many, many years, we have two counselors here who are operating businesses out of their residence. This is a violation, I understand, of our town ordinances, running businesses in residential areas. Why has this never been addressed? I know that one counselor has taken the opportunity to, she went out and got the special permits or is working on them.
It's taken care of, we're all
Right.
legal.
Okay. Then why wasn't this done way back when, instead of, why weren't any of the counselors fined, paid a forfeiture or whatever to the town during the time frame that they were not legal? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. Mike Cody, would you like to just explain to people about how the idea of a conditional use under a zoning law works? I think that's what some of the people are running into, and also home occupations.
Mike Cody, Code Enforcement Officer. Most of our zoning areas in town do allow to have what they call a homestead home occupation, where they can do a business in their home without any kind of outside signs and can use up to 25% of their homes. It so happens that this particular counselor is in a zone where she could have a business or run a business by going to the planning board under a conditional use and get approved by the planning board. And in this case, this is what she did and her family did to run this business. They have been approved by the planning board, and the conditional use does allow them to run this business in a particular zone. There are a lot of areas where people are doing businesses that are not brought to our attention. If it isn't brought to our attention, we can't address it. And when this was brought to my attention, I informed them that they could be approved at the planning board under this conditional use. And they came forward, went to the planning board, and got approved for that business.
Thank you, Mike. All right, anything further from the public? All right, we'll move on to the next item.
Is under council communications.
All right, Mike?
Steve, I just have a question on the letter from a Lisbon Emergency. Have they started paying anything on their loan yet?
No, they have not.
So they're was it 5 years before they had to start to pay or whatever?
5 years, and the deed is written,
Right, I just want to make sure that they don't owe us money, that
No,
they
they don't.
should have to pay us.
nope, they don't.
So that reverts back to us now?
We're back to us, that's the way it was written in the deed.
Yep.
So when did we actually let that loan go?
I'd have to pull the records, I have them in my office.
Can you pull I'd like to know the date of when we authorized them for that.
Anyone else have comments?
I'll be brief.
Okay.
Moxie Committee is in full swing. Moxie Days is July 9th. The website's been updated. Vendor and parade applications along with sponsorship information. Is sponsorship on there? I'm not sure if the sponsorship is on there, but other things are on there. We're encouraging people and/or organizations to apply to be in the parade, just so we know who is coming and so we can have a good lineup. There's more information there. You can contact myself, Twyla, or Scott Benson, ECD Director, if you'd like more information. That's it.
Ed Roger?
I have a couple issues about the last meeting that we just attended at the community school. I don't think that what happened there towards the end of the meeting was totally necessary.
I feel the same way.
And I feel that we've got to find a different way to communicate with one another if one wants to speak. Another thing, and I had, I think, 7 people call me. They want to know why this is all they're getting for a budget. They feel that the school presented a itemized budget for the people to review, and they want to know why we can't have one for the municipal budget. They feel that this is totally unacceptable, and they want something more detailed than that. Is that something that we can work on for our
We
next
already have.
meeting?
We've condensed everything, double-sided, it's on the website, if anybody wants to go look at that, it's all the same documents that you have in front of you. If they want to come in and get copies, that's certainly possible too. We can provide that to them.
You know, they felt that the items were listed. Why is that money needed? Increases in the budget, why is that? And this has basically told them nothing, and they were just very insulted by it.
Well, that's why we have public hearings, though, is for them to ask questions. I mean, if there's a particular item on
Well-
there, it should be their right as a citizen to ask.
As you know, Gina, people don't like to stand up in crowd and speak.
Well, then it's their loss. I mean, I do agree that we should have something more entailed, but that's their time to voice their citizen
I'm
duty
just-
to ask questions, is
I'm
my
just-
opinion.
I'm
So,
just a messenger.
Okay.
I was asked to ask the question.
Steve, can you supply us with what you pulled together? Maybe so just all council can see it. And
Yeah, I think the more information we give people, the better. Let people see what's going on and clear up some rumors.
Well, the problem is when you don't give them information, they make up their own.
Very true. And I'd like to just be able to put all this information in our book right out there for them to see. It'd be my preference, get everything out there and clear it up.
Town office is open 5 days a week. We can make copies for people anytime they want to come in and ask for them. That's what we do.
Is it something you can put on the website?
It's already on the
Yeah.
website.
So I thought the whole detailed budget is on the
Whole
website.
detailed budget on there, okay. All right, I do want to clear up one rumor that I heard going around. You have not budgeted yourself for a $10,000 increase.
No.
I've heard that going around, and it's not in the budget that I can see.
No, it isn't.
And I would not vote for it, but not because I have something against you, I wouldn't.
You know what's in the budget.
Right, I know what's in the budget,
That should have been clear.
yeah. All right, any further comments from council? All right, next item?
is under executive session, Order 2011-54, to go into executive session per 1 MRSA, Section 405-6A, to discuss personnel matters.
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor? And opposed?
Order passed, 7-0.
All right. How long do you think this will take, Steve?
About 5 minutes.